Inside a near pitch-black training hall, a certain boy was creeping his way forward towards a door. He stood just outside the entrance. Then he stuck his head through the door and peeked into the room, looking around to see if anyone could spot him. And just hovering above him was something that looked like a miniature bull, a little larger than a human's fist. Although this one also had tiny wings and 2 large fangs on the front of his face. "Did you spot anyone, Ham?" the kid asked. "No, but are you really sure we should be doing this? You could get kicked out of the family." The little flying bull replied, fluttering around in the air. "As if that could ever happen. My dad's one of the 13 family leaders, and I'm the one that's going to be his successor." The boy then walked into the large hall, with him following in the air closely behind him. With his gelled-back black hair and his dark clothing, it was nearly impossible to spot him at night. But there was one distinctive thing that stood out about the boy. It would allow you to see him in the dark even if you were quite a distance away. It was his glowing red eyes, which gave the boy away as a vampire. His name was Fex, and today he had come to the hall inside his family's castle for one reason: to go to the human world. On his back, he carried a relatively large backpack, packed with all sorts of things: clothes, toothpaste, a brush, and all sorts of essentials. After all, he didn't know how long he would be visiting the human world for. Just then, out of his backpack, Fex pulled a small silver ring which had 10 crystals embedded on the inside and all around. He lifted the ring into the air before kissing it. "I have to thank you again, Blood Evolver, wherever you are. Because of you, I can finally leave this place." He then placed the ring on the ring finger of his right hand and was finally ready to go. "Come on, Ham. Hurry up." "Wait, I think I hear someone," Ham said. Just as Ham said it, the sound of footsteps could be heard. Fex quickly looked around the hall, which was filled with square-shaped machinery on the floor, each spaced in equal distance from each other. The gap between each one was quite far. Quickly rummaging through his backpack, Fex pulled out what looked like a piece of paper. "Come on. Where is it? I need to remember that access code." But the nerves were getting the better of him, and his fingers fumbled as he dropped the piece of paper onto the floor. "Fex, there, right there," the bull said, now visibly sweating. "Well, let's just hope I don't end up somewhere too bad." Fex then rushed over to one of the square machines on the floor and tapped on top of the machine. A bright display lit up, asking for an access code. "Please input the correct access code for your destination." He closed his eyes and tried to remember one of the numbers formed the piece of paper, but he struggled to remember which one led to where. In the end, he had to just go for it and type in the only one he could think of: access code accepted. The contraption started to open, and mechanical sounds could be heard. From the hallway, one of the guards who was roaming could hear the mechanical sounds coming from the room. "Is someone using the teleporters? I don't remember an outing plan for today," the man thought. He quickly ran into the room, and just then he could see Fex standing in front of the circular teleport device. "Fex, what are you doing?" "Don't go in," the man shouted. Fex turned around and looked up at the man. He gave him a huge smile before saluting the man. He grabbed Ham and jumped backwards into the teleport circle. Once Fex had gone through, the machine had automatically closed down on its own. "I knew that kid always did crazy things, but this has just gone too far," the man said. "I must report this to the family leader immediately." Meanwhile, inside the teleporter, Fex's mind was being distorted, and all he could see around him was a bright array of different colors. "Ham, you need to transform. The humans will have a fit if they see you flying above me." A small puff of black smoke appeared around Ham. When the black smoke went away, it was replaced with what looked like a black dangling earring. It was round at the top with a little symbol of a bull on it. In contrast, the dangling bit was long and rectangular on the bottom. Fex quickly grabbed it before putting it on his right ear. Finally, "Here I come, by dark, gloomy world," Fex yelled excitedly. Just then the tunnel of colors around him seemed to end, and now something felt like it was dragging him through to the other side. When Fex had opened his eyes, he found himself in a large dome-like building with digital signs going all across the walls showing all sorts of advertisements. But the biggest one of them all was one that said, "Welcome to Tocklin City." "I finally made it," Fex thought. Fex was currently inside what was known as a city station on Earth. In the center of the city was a large circular device that glowed a bright white color, and every so often people would appear from it. Several different people were coming through, some wearing building equipment, others in suits, and some were even travelers wearing beast gear. City stations could usually be found on most shelters on other planets. Large factions also owned them, as well as the top corporations. There were two types of city stations, an arrival station and a departure station. The departure stations were usually filled with all types of checks. Even those that were privately owned would receive regular checkups from the Human Federation. They would even send their own guys to work as security. If it didn't meet a certain standard, then it would simply be put out of commission. And of course, at each of these stations was an access code that needed to be imputed. This access code was usually given to only a couple of people who worked at city stations. Fex couldn't help but stare around and look in amazement at the place. "Can you believe it, Ham?" Fex said. "We made it, and there are so many humans. They look nearly the same as us, although there are some incredibly ugly ones." Fex said a little too loud. The people around him started to give Fex strange looks as they heard him say those words, but at the same time, they couldn't help staring at him. Although he was a teenage boy who looked around 16, they could feel a certain charm pulling them in. "Fex, you need to suppress your abilities," Ham said. "Oh, that's right. I nearly forgot." Fex closed his eyes and focused, letting the aura that was surrounding his body shrink inside himself. Suddenly, the people who were looking at him no longer felt an urge to stare. Unlike the departure station, the arrival station didn't have much security checks, apart from a few guards who stood by the doors to the exit. After all the checks were done on the other end, and only when they sure it was safe, would the access code be inputted. There were also several people that seemed to be waiting for their loved ones. Fex headed for the exit, as if he didn't have a worry in the world. But just as he reached the exit, he could see the doors to the outside where the sun was glaring. "Time to put this ring to the test," Fex said. He closed his eyes and took one step out into the open sun, and nothing happened. There was no itching feeling or burning pain like when he had gone through his training. It was just the same as when he was in the dark. With a big smile on his face, he continued to walk forward and started to explore the city. From the city station, he was able to see the edge far away in the distance. The city was surrounded by a large wall that was nearly taller than all the skyscrapers around them. On the buildings, there were also several advertisements for different things, but what he kept seeing the most were either companies selling ability books or those that were recruiting travelers to join their faction. After walking a while, Fex decided to stop by what looked like a food shop. He saw a man walk out with a bag full of food and drinks. "Perhaps I can get this thing called wine, the drink my grandpa was talking about, from this shop," Fex thought. As he went inside, he started to look around the shop in the drinks section for an item labeled as wine. However, he noticed while he was walking around in the shop that others would still continually look at him. "I have my ability suppressed, right, Ham?" Fex asked. "Yes, I can no longer feel your presence. It must just be my natural good looks then." After ignoring the people giving him sideway glances, he had eventually found the drink labeled as wine. "There's so many. I guess they all taste the same, right?" He grabbed a random bottle and rushed over to the counter, waiting for his turn. "I would like to purchase this, please," Fex said as he started to get out his money card. "ID, please," the counter clerk asked. "ID?" Fex was confused. Unknown to him, every citizen of Earth was required to carry around an ID. If Fex had paid attention in his classes, then he would have known that he would obtain a fake one when he reached the age of 18. "How old are you, kid?" the clerk said as he looked Fex over from head to toe. 16. "Can I not purchase this drink then?" "I have the money," Fex said, with an innocent smile on his face. "No, of course you can," the clerk said, smiling as he proceeded with the payment, as usual. Then as Fex had left the shop, the clerk immediately opened up his screen and dialed the number 111. "Hello, I'd like to report someone on Bader Street." "Yeah, it looks like a student who is committing draft evasion. Black hair, gelled back, with an earring. He didn't seem to have an ID on him either." Walking down the street with his backpack in his hand, Fex was smiling broadly. His grandpa had looked after him nearly his whole life, and it was only a few years ago that he had decided to go into an eternal sleep and give control of the family over to Fex's father. But Fex never forgot the stories his grandpa used to tell him, the countless things Earth had to offer them as vampires. Of course, it had been many years since his grandpa had visited Earth, but the one thing he would never stop talking about was this drink called wine. This was why Fex put it at the top of his to-do list when he would finally visit Earth. "You're being followed, you know," Ham said. "Yeah, I can tell," Fex replied. "Did the family find us already?" Ham asked. Fex started to sniff the air when he noticed that there were at least 4 people following them from a distance. "No, they don't smell like vampires. Most likely they're humans. But why are they following us?" Fex said. Although Fex didn't pay much attention during his lessons, there was one law that was hammered into his head. Never, under any circumstance, reveal yourself to humans. If they found out what you were, you only had 2 options. Bring them back with you to turn them into a blooded, or kill them. Right now he was sure he hadn't done anything to make him look suspicious. Although there was a law against revealing that you're a vampire, there was no such law saying anything about fighting with humans. Fex decided to turn around a corner into a dark alleyway to confront the humans following him. "I know you're following me," Fex said. "Is it because I bought this?" He lifted up the plastic bag that contained the bottle of wine. "Look, I know times are rough, but I heard the cities were quite wealthy. If you want, I can buy another bottle for you," Fex offered. The 2 men stepped towards Fex. "Relax. We are not looking for trouble," one of them said. "We just want to confirm your age, and if you have any ID on you." The other one said, "It's about my age again. What's with this place?" "I already said I'm 16, and about the ID, I must have lost it somewhere," Fex exclaimed. The 2 men then looked at each other. When people were trying to avoid the military draft, it was quite common for them to get rid of their IDs. They would try to live their life by other means, never showing their ID card. But Fex looked young, and he had also confirmed his age to them. No more questioning was needed. The actions they had to take were clear. "Fire when you're ready," the first man said. "Looks like I might have to fight my way out of this one," Fex thought, but he knew he had to be careful not to use any of his vampire abilities. But that didn't mean he had to hold back from using his regular abilities. He took a step forward, and a small sharp pain was felt in the side of his neck. "What the?" As he looked to the side, he noticed that something that looked like a dart had been shot into his neck. Inside the dart, a green liquid could be seen. "Why am I suddenly feeling this?" His eyes started to close, and he had collapsed onto the floor. The 2 men walked up to the sleeping boy. "Luckily, he didn't have a hardening ability. I was ready to get into a scrap there," one of the men said. Back at the castle, a certain man was sitting in a large throne-like chair. In his left hand, a single glass contained a red liquid inside, while his other hand was busy restlessly tapping on the arm of his chair. The man looked like the mature version of Fex. They were almost identical with the exception of the goatee that slightly covered his chin. While sitting in the chair, he had a deep frown on his face. This man was Fex's father, Lee Sanguinis. "Is there any update?" he said. Kneeling down in front of him were 5 of his subordinates. "Yes, Sir Lee. We discovered that Fex has arrived at the city of Tocklin. Unfortunately, it seems like the humans have managed to get to him before we could, sir," one of the subordinates said. Just then Lee slapped his hand across his forehead while continuing to shake his head. "That boy will be the ruin of this family," Lee said. "The silly boy never paid any attention to his classes, yet he always listened to my father's crazy stories. Do we know where they have taken him?" "Our resources say that he was taken to one of the military bases to be admitted into military school. When they found him, they thought he was a draft evader," the same subordinate replied. Lee was busy thinking about what to do. If the other families got word of what had happened, then his family would become the laughingstock of the vampire community. Even more worrisome was if their secret was discovered, then their family would also be punished. Luckily, it seemed like the news hadn't spread yet. The other vampire families were all too busy discussing the new family that had appeared. Lee then looked at the 5 subordinates in front of him and was deciding who it would be best to send. "Silver," Lee said. "Yes, sir," a female subordinate replied as she stood up. Just like her name suggested, she had bright, long silver hair that was tied in a ponytail that nearly went down to her knees. "As you are the faithful blood knight of the Sanguinis family, I task with retrieving and returning Fex back to us. Make sure nobody knows about this." You are free to use whatever resources from the family as you see fit. Sliver then bowed down once again. I shall complete my task without fail, she said, with confidence in her voice. The meeting had ended, and each of them had left the room, leaving Lee with his own thoughts. The human world, huh? It has been a long time since I have ventured there. Perhaps this will be a good learning experience for him. Remembering his own time on Earth, a rage inside his body started to consume him, and the glass he held in his hand shattered to pieces. It will be to teach him just how cruel those damn humans are to the other worlds. All of the students from the expedition had been gathered and were taken to the first-year assembly hall. They weren't allowed to go back to their dorms or put away their equipment. All they could do was talk to one another and speculate why the expedition had been canceled. Slowly, a strange atmosphere started to fill the room. It wasn't normal for such a thing to happen, especially so sudden like that. I saw some of the Mech from the city leave the shelter. A student said, seriously? Why would they mobilize those things? I thought they said the highest tier of beast on the planet was an intermediate tier. Didn't you hear? Another student chimed in. A student spotted black smoke off in the distance in the desert. It seemed like it was coming from a ship. You don't mean? The student gasped. That's right. I heard it might have been a Dalki. The other student replied. A head count was made, and it was made more than once. After the counting had been completed, it looked like the teachers had a worried look on their face as they talked with each other. Faye stood in front of all the first years, prepared to make the announcement, but she was still waiting for all the information to arrive. A soldier came up to her side and whispered something into her ear, after which they did several more head counts. Are you sure? Faye replied. Have you checked the school? Perhaps they have come back? The soldier nodded in response. All Faye could do was clench her fist. The report had stated that they had found both Hugo's and Ben's body out in the desert. They were able to confirm they had died from the Dalki. However, the other three in their group were never found. The only thing they could assume was that the Dalki had also killed them. The 5 of them were part of the group, so it was the most logical conclusion. Attention! Faye shouted. The students immediately got in line and saluted her. Then a holographic screen appeared behind them. It was the scoreboard with all the team scores. First things first, as you may know, the expedition has been canceled, Faye explained. What that means for all of you is that the points you had obtained in the first 2 days before the expedition ended will be your final score for this exam. What? Erin blurted out, and she wasn't the only one. Right now, their group still had all the winged lizard crystals they had obtained from Bird's group. They hadn't had time to head back to the shelter to have them counted. As Erin looked at their team's position, they still had the same score as before and were placed around the middle of every other group, while Bird's group still sat at the top. Enough. There are more important things than the test. Faye shouted, calming down the chatter amongst students. Right now, there is a high possibility that some of your fellow students have died on this test. And worst of all, it was to the threat we have all been training against, the Dalki. The chatter started once again, and this time she slammed her weapon into the ground. It caused a loud, banging noise to be heard, as its vibrations bounced from the walls and echoed around the entire hall. The Dalki has been swiftly dealt with, and it seems like this was not a planned attack, but a stray ship. This was an unfortunate event, but these things happen from time to time. But this is a reminder to you all why we need to train so hard every single day, and I hope you will remember that. You will have the next 2 days off to rest. After that, classes will return to normal. Rest up for the night. You are dismissed, Faye said, ending her speech. Immediately after Faye had left, the noise in the hall returned to its peak. The students couldn't believe what had happened and soon started to realize which group had most likely been killed by the Dalki. But Erin wasn't bothered about any of that. You, she shouted and pointed at Quinn. Why did you hide your strength? If you had fought with us that day, instead of hiding under that umbrella, we would have gotten a better score. Wait, calm down, Erin, Layla said as she tried getting in between the two. I'm not happy with you either, Layla. You knew all this, didn't you? Erin frowned at her before turning to Quinn. And what's with your strange power? How did you heal Peter? He should have died. No more excuses. I want answers for everything that happened. She screamed. Aaron looked at the scoreboard once again, seeing that their position was in the middle, and then looked at Quinn back again, only this time her face was filled with tears. If you were that strong, then why didn't you help? Tears streamed down her face. Quinn knew this whole time, from Aaron's actions, that this assessment was important to her, but the way she was acting now was almost obsessive. Everyone strived to be the best or come out on top, but not like this. These actions weren't normal. I think it's best if we all head back to our room, Layla said. We can explain everything there, and I'm sure Peter has a lot of questions of his own. While the first-year students were being informed of what happened, the three generals were having a meeting of their own. They were at the top floor of the academy, and each of them was sitting at a round table in the head general's office. The only chair that was left empty was that of the head general. Nathan, the head of the first years, Duke, the head of the second years, and the last general, Mike, who was head of communications. His job was to coordinate with the other military bases and plan either joint exercises or missions together. The three of them sat there in silence, and Nathan and Duke just couldn't help having a staring match with each other. Until Duke finally broke the silence. I wonder how many of your students would have died on that expedition if it wasn't for that Sergeant Leo of yours. Duke said, I doubt you even have the strength to take on a Dalki yourself. Are you upset because you can't bribe him to come over to your side with one of those Earth ability books of yours? Nathan replied, It's a pity that your tactics of recruiting only works on those weak-minded fools. Duke then stood up from his chair and looked like he was about to hit Nathan, but at the same time, Mike stepped in front of the two. Guys, both of you calm down. I'm telling you now, if I see an injury on you when I leave this room or when I walk around the academy, I won't be healing you, and I won't let you two go to my niece Haley either. Although Mike tried calming the two of them down, he knew most of his words would fall on deaf ears. These two had always hated each other. But then the one person who could calm them down entered the room. The door swung wide open, and a middle-aged man wearing a business suit came walking in. He had neatly cut hair and a suitcase in his hand. He didn't look like he was part of the army at all. But as soon as he had entered the room, all three of the men bowed in salute. We welcome the head general. They all said at once, Calm down. This whole situation has caused enough of a headache as it is. The head general proceeded to sit down in his seat as he brought up an initial report for all three of them to see. We all know these odd attacks have been happening on our beast planets for a while. It seems like these attacks are happening more frequently, but not just that. If we take a look at the B solar system, every single time an attack takes place, they seem to be getting closer and closer to our starting planet. Do you think they're aiming for the city station? Mike asked. It would make sense. The head replied. For now, I believe these solo Dalki are just sent as scouts. They have no clue how strong we have become in this time frame, and they have no clue what security measures we have, but I fear this may mean that the war will be starting again soon. After speaking of these matters with the other generals, the head general went on to speak about a few other things. It was rare for him to actually be in the school, as he would often get called out for meetings, but after going through all the things that needed to be done, there was one last thing he needed to mention. In a couple of weeks, we have a visit from Mr. True Dream, which means I will need you to prepare some students for him. The three generals gave awkward glances at each other as they heard this piece of news. Duke, I expect you to do well like you always have. The head general said. You can count on me, sir, Duke replied. It was already night, but there was still some time left for the group to talk before their curfew would start. Therefore, they all decided to head to the boys' room to discuss what on earth had happened during the fight with the Dalki. At this point, the tears had stopped falling from Aaron's anxious eyes, but nonetheless Layla continued to comfort and reassure her along the way. Quinn didn't know when it happened, but it seemed like the two of them were now closer than ever. It was strange seeing Layla being the one helping Aaron. When he first arrived at the academy, this was a scene that he'd never imagined he would see. The entire walk through the hallway going towards the boys' room, everybody kept silent. It was eerie. None of them knew exactly how to explain what had happened. Peter was especially curious about what had happened after he jumped between Quinn and the Dalki. Hey, Quinn, Vorden whispered as the two of them were walking in the front, leading the group. Are you really going to tell her everything? Can't you just keep it about the shadow ability and forget about the other thing? Then how would I explain what happened to Peter? How about all the blood that Layla was collecting? Quinn replied, You have a good point, but what if she freaks out and starts telling everyone? Vorden asked. Quinn looked back at Aaron, who was behind him. To be honest, it seemed to him that her priorities weren't geared towards learning about Quinn or Peter, but on why he had to hide his strength from her in the first place. Actually, Quinn said, I'm more worried regarding how Peter will react about the whole thing. Eventually, they arrived at the boys' dormitory, and they were all able to enter the room in peace. The three boys promptly sat on Vorden's bed, while the two girls sat on Quinn's. I suppose I should be the one who starts explaining first, Quinn said while standing up. He moved towards the center of the two groups. Recently, as you may all know, Vorden and I had entered the Red Portal planet. While we were there, I discovered a strange ability book, one that allowed me to control shadows. It was a strange book because it disappeared the moment I learned the ability. Quinn then tapped the surface of his wristwatch 3 times. The number suddenly changed from a 1 to a 6. When he tapped it another 3 times, it changed back to 1 again. I knew it, Aaron said. But why did you have to hide it from us? If you wanted to keep it a secret from everyone, we could have just hidden and hunted away from others. Because of you, we probably would have lost our chance at becoming first. At that point, Quinn took in a deep breath. That's because I have an even bigger secret that I was hiding. Layla and Vorden stared at Quinn. They struggled to keep their gazes on him. They knew this must have been hard to say for him. Vorden wasn't too sure if it was the right thing to, but he had already prepared himself for whatever would come of this. He knew that Quinn was too kind-hearted to deal with this himself. If Aaron wasn't going to keep it a secret, then Vorden would be the one to do something about it. I'm a vampire, Quinn said, looking at Aaron and Peter with a nervous look on his face. Peter gave no reaction at all, but it wasn't because he had figured it out or anything. He just couldn't believe the words he was hearing. Still, it all started to make sense in a way, with the umbrella and Layla collecting the blood. However, he questioned himself if vampires were actually real, though Peter's train of thought was quickly interrupted by Aaron. What's a vampire? Aaron asked, the innocent ignorance showing on her face. The others then all turned their heads, now looking towards Aaron. It wasn't that rare for someone not to know what a vampire was in this modern day and age. A lot of entertainment products connected to vampires had lessened over the years. There weren't many films, books, or even games that had been made featuring them. However, on TV, there were plenty of times when old films would be shown, and this was where most of the others got their knowledge of what a vampire was. However, Aaron had been raised without a life of entertainment. There were no fantasy books, games, or movies provided for her. All her time and education only had to do with fighting or learning about the current state of the world. She wasn't the only one in this position, since a lot of them shared her ignorance. Quinn was in a similar situation himself. He had heard the term vampires, but didn't really know much about them, so he had to rely on Layla to explain it to him. With that confession, the others slowly started to explain what a vampire was to her, how they were weaker in the sunlight, and most of all, they required human blood to keep on living. All of this news was coming as quite a shock to Aaron because it sounded so fake in her mind. So this is what you guys came up with to try to give an excuse why Quinn didn't use his powers. She said, Well, I'm not buying it. I don't believe that a human that needs blood to survive exists. If there were such creatures as vampires, why haven't they revealed themselves to the world already? Aaron then went towards the door, pulling it open before saying her final words. You guys disappoint me. I was starting to think that we were a team, not a bunch of liars. With that, she closed the door behind her and stormed off. Do you think she'll tell anyone? Quinn asked. Are you kidding? With a reaction like that? Vorden replied. She didn't even believe it herself. She'll have an easier time convincing someone that she's a boy rather than you being a vampire. Well, how do we expect her to react? Oh, it's okay. You can have my blood any time. She's not Layla. For goodness sake. Layla was annoyed at Vorden's remarks, but at the same time, she couldn't deny that she had the same reaction when she found out. I'm going to go check up on her just to make sure she really doesn't tell anyone. I'll give you an update about it tomorrow, Quinn. Although Aaron didn't seem to believe it, Peter for some reason did. He didn't know how to explain it, but ever since he had left, his body felt different. His hearing was better, and he didn't feel as weak as before. There was some sort of connection that he felt between Quinn and him. It was as if the two of them were now connected, somehow. The last thing that convinced him was the fact that he wasn't dead. He remembered seeing the Dalkey's fist go through his own stomach. "Quinn, does it mean that I'm a vampire now, too?" Peter asked. As Peter asked that question, Quinn didn't know what to reply because Peter wasn't the same as him. While Quinn was originally a halfling, Peter was something known as a ghoul. Just what was a vampire ghoul? Quinn thought. "I'm afraid it isn't good news." The system said. Out of all the possibilities he could have turned into, this was the outcome I was hoping for the least. The system's words didn't give Quinn great hope, and what he was about to hear lessened his optimism even further. Lately, the system seemed to be the bearer of bad news more than bringing good. Quinn already had a feeling that the word ghoul didn't have the best sound, but the moment Peter seemed fine, and Quinn decided to put his worries behind him. "What's with the look on your face?" Peter said worriedly. "Oh, it's nothing. I just think maybe we should note this down on a piece of paper or something so you remember what I tell you," Quinn replied. He then went over to his desk and pulled out a piece of paper from his drawer. Vorden and Peter were hovering over his shoulder, taking a look at what he was writing. First, Quinn put his name at the top and by the side wrote down the word, vampire. He then listed all the strengths and weaknesses he had. Super strength, abnormal healing, and the ability to see in darkness. He also listed down the powers he had along with it. Then underneath, with a line branching off from the top, he wrote down Peter's name and wrote the word ghoul. "I'm a ghoul," Peter said, looking at the word. "What does that mean?" "First, do you feel any different, Peter? Or has anything changed, like voices in your head or weird things in your vision?" Quinn was trying to see if Peter also had a system, but he needed to tiptoe around the word. "Other than my body feeling better, there haven't been any other changes." "What about your ability?" Vorden asked. I remember when Quinn asked me if I wanted to turn into a vampire, he said I would lose my ability. Peter then quickly went over to his desk where he always had a small ball of earth to practice on. He held it on his hands and tried to do what he usually did, but there was nothing. "What's not working? Do I really have no ability at all?" Peter said, all panicky. "Calm down," Quinn interrupted. "Don't worry about it too much. Although your ability is gone, you can learn a new one. We just need to find one that's compatible like my shadow book." "You mean I can have the same ability as yours?" Peter asked. Quinn started to laugh nervously. "Unfortunately, after learning the ability is got destroyed by a beast." Vorden quickly interrupted. "Anyway, let me try to explain everything I know," Quinn said as he grabbed the pencils and wrote a pros and cons list right next to Peter's name. "Are you ready?" the system asked. While the system explained the difference between a vampire and a vampire ghoul, Quinn would write it down on a piece of paper while explaining it out loud to the others. "Why don't we start with the positives?" the system said. "First, unlike a vampire, a ghoul is not affected by sunlight." Peter breathed a sigh of relief when he heard this. "I thought I might have to start carrying an umbrella around everywhere." The system continued, and so did Quinn. "Ghouls are stronger, faster, and can see better than a human. But their main strength is their incredible healing abilities. They are even more impressive than yours, Quinn. Broken bones, chunks of flesh will be instantly healed on the spot." "That isn't too bad," Vorden said. "Peter, this means we can just say you have a self-healing ability. There are a few of them out there. Although we will have to keep it a secret from the school, since they all think you have an earth ability. What if someone sees or tries hurting me and finds out?" Peter asked. "Don't worry. Not many people know of the other student's ability other than the staff. But if push comes to shove, I could try clearing their mind with my influence skill," Quinn replied. "Now, the next bit of information is more for you, Quinn." The system said, "Ghouls are most loyal to their maker. The main reason for this is because your blood resides inside their body. Unfortunately, what this means is you will need to supply Peter with your own blood, otherwise his body will start to deteriorate and eventually will cease to exist. As long as he gets a supply of your blood, then he will live on forever by your side." "What do you mean by loyal?" Quinn asked. "Similar to how your charm skill works. Whatever you command, Peter will feel like he has no choice but to obey, although this does depend on the amount of your blood that remains inside his body. The longer he goes without a new dose of blood, the less inclined he will be to follow your orders." Right now, Quinn was feeling bad for Layla and Vorten. It seems like a bloody business was taking place. While Quinn would get his blood from Layla or Vorten, then Peter would need to get his blood from him, which would require Quinn to get more blood from the others. What about human blood? Well, I need to drink that, Peter asked as he gulped, feeling a strange, new hunger in his stomach. No, there is no need to drink human blood, Quinn replied. Actually, unlike me who gets stronger from human blood, it will have no effect on you. Right now, it seemed like they were getting a clearer picture of how a ghoul worked. It had superhuman capabilities similar to a vampire, but had none of the vampire skills Quinn had at his disposal. But it did have supernatural healing that surpassed his own, as well as being able to retain his strength in the sun. Although he wasn't too strong now, once Peter had an ability, the others could see him becoming quite powerful. The only con so far was the fact that he needed Quinn's blood, although Quinn decided to leave the loyalty part out of his explanation. The two of them already felt this strange connection without having to say anything, and Quinn had a feeling if he asked Peter to do something, he would. But Quinn knew the system wouldn't have said this was one of the worst options if this was the only issue with being a ghoul. Now, time for the cons, the system said. Hearing these words made Quinn's hand shake a little, and the others could see this as he was getting ready to write down what the system was telling him. First off, the ability for Peter to eat regular food has completely disappeared. If he eats regular food, he will immediately throw it back up. This didn't sound too bad. After all, Quinn himself was only in a slightly better situation. At the moment, the only food he could enjoy was meat. Everything else seemed to give him quite the allergic reaction to things, similar to that time he had eaten the food pill. But as long as it was meat, and more specifically red meat, he could still enjoy the taste of it quite well. Then does he just have to live off my blood then? Quinn asked the system. No, the blood is a rare thing and will hardly be needed. I will more often feed Peter just to keep him loyal to you, but still, a ghoul needs a food source. The system replied. Well, just tell me already, what is it? Quinn responded in an annoyed way. A ghoul needs to feed on human flesh. The system said, sounding softer at the end. The pencil in Quinn's hands had dropped onto the table and rolled onto the floor. Quinn, is something wrong? Vorten asked. He then turned to look at Peter. Peter, you're not feeling hungry by any chance, are you? Quinn asked. I'm feeling a bit peckish. I haven't eaten since this morning after all. Peter replied honestly. Human blood was fine, but human flesh, it wasn't like Quinn could chop off Layla's finger and feed it to Peter every day, and more than anything, what would Peter think of all this? During this whole time, Quinn had basically been repeating to the others what the system had told him, making sure to leave out the parts that weren't needed. They had a right to know about the vampire stuff, especially since the two of them were closely involved, but there was no reason for them to know about the system. But when the system had said the last line, he couldn't hide the shock of the words that had been spoken, and now was thinking how to break the news to Peter. Peter, maybe it's best if you sat down for this, Quinn said. Why? Peter looked at him, fidgeting. You're making me even more scared. Just sit down, Quinn said. But as he said these words, his eyes started to glow a little. Peter didn't know why, but he felt like he needed to complete the task immediately. After sitting on the bed, Quinn was trying to find the best way to put the bad news into words. I can see this is troublesome, so let me give you a solution for now, the system said. As a temporary measure, he might be able to last a few days on raw animal meat, but sooner or later you will have to grab him human flesh. He looked Peter in the eyes and finally found the courage to tell him. Being a ghoul means you can no longer eat regular food. You're going to have to eat raw meat from now on. Raw meat as an uncooked food? Peter questioned. Won't I get sick from it, though? They carry so many diseases, and the human body isn't designed to process raw food. As Peter continued to speak, his words got faster as he panicked even more. Maybe you're wrong. Why don't I just try eating some normal food and see how it goes? For goodness sake, Peter, listen to yourself, Vorten shouted. I know this must be a scary thing, but listen. Quinn is just trying to help you here. Just then, Vorten and Quinn decided to head to the nearby convenience store to grab some things as a test while they asked Peter to stay in the room. Once again, although Peter was scared and wanted to come with them, a certain feeling was passing from Quinn and onto Peter, making him feel like he had to obey. I guess this is what the system was talking about. I can feel a connection between the two of us. Quinn thought. As the two of them walked to the convenience store, Quinn was keeping awfully quiet, which made Vorden suspicious that Quinn was holding something else back. Go on, tell me then. Vorden said. You could have gone to the shop on your own, but you wanted me to come along. It's about Peter, Quinn said quietly. I didn't tell Peter everything. Being a ghoul doesn't mean he has to eat raw meat. He needs to eat raw human meat. Raw animal meat will only work for a short time. Suddenly, Vorden stopped in his tracks. Quinn, I'm being serious when I suggest this here, but wouldn't it be better to just kill Peter? And before you say anything, hear me out. He already tried taking our lives, and we know the reason behind it now. But I'm afraid this will just cause you more problems in the future. He saved your life, and you saved his, and if I kept the scoreboard, he still needs to save you one more time and make it even. He's not the type of guy who can handle this, and if he gets caught, then don't think he won't give you in. He won't. He can't, Quinn replied. How can you be so sure? Vorden asked, a bit surprised by Quinn's sudden answer. It was hard for Quinn to explain, but he could feel the connection between the two of them now. Essentially, Peter's whole existence now depended on him, and as long as Quinn asked for it, Peter would do it. Well, I can tell you won't take my suggestion, but let me tell you this then. Vorden said, taking a life isn't as easy as you think. Although Quinn knew the weight behind Vorden's words, what Vorden didn't know was Quinn had already done just that, and it was easier than he had expected. Perhaps for a human, it wasn't so easy, but the same couldn't be said for a vampire like Quinn now, especially those people that deserved it. The two continued to go to the shop and bought all sorts of packs of meat. Vorden was ready to use his wristwatch, but Quinn just straight up paid for it instead. When did you become so wealthy? Vorden asked. I have my ways. Quinn winked back with a smile. Finally, the two had returned to the dorm room where Peter had stayed waiting for them. He was in the same spot as when the two had left him. That smells nice, Peter said. What did you bring? Quinn then pulled out the packs of food. Some were raw pieces of steak and pork, while the others were pre-packed food that had already been cooked. Peter didn't need to see anything because his nose was already telling him which one smelled better. It was one of the first clear signs that he had changed. Immediately when they entered the room, the sweet scent had filled the entire room, and it wasn't coming from the cooked meat. Well, do you want to try the packed pre-cooked meat first? Quinn asked. But I'm telling you, you're going to get sick from this. No, it's okay, Peter said, with the sound of resignation in his voice. Just give me the other stuff. They placed the raw steak out on a plate and put it right in front of Peter. Is he really going to eat it? Vorden said. I don't know, it looks pretty good to me as well, Quinn replied. I can't tell if you're trying to be funny or what, man, Vorden said, with a disgusted look on his face. It didn't take long for Peter to dive in. Seeing the raw steak in front of him suddenly caused his hunger to grow more and more to the point he couldn't hold back, and without even using the knife and fork by his side, he picked up the steak with his two hands and started biting into it. His once dull teeth had turned sharp like a lion's, helping him rip the meat to pieces, and after only a couple of minutes the whole steak had been devoured. Sobbing then could be heard from his chair. I'm a monster, he cried. Peter, Vorden said, you're less of a monster now than you were before. At least you know what you are, and what you did before was wrong. How you think Quinn feels after saving your life, and you saying that right in front of him? Peter knew Vorden was right, so he wiped his tears and stood up smiling at Quinn. As he did, his teeth were all bloody from the meal. Thank you, Quinn. I'm sorry for being so selfish. With the experiment done, and the other two feeling a bit better, they placed the remainder of the raw meat in their fridge. But the only one that got a good night's sleep was Peter. The other two were lost in thought. Vorden couldn't stop thinking about the fact that he was sleeping in a room with a cannibal. At least Quinn would only suck his blood, but with Peter, he might wake up with an arm missing. While Quinn was thinking along similar lines. System, do you know how long until he starts craving for human flesh? And will I still be able to control him? Quinn asked. His hunger will outgrow your commands, but he will not attack you. However, about a time frame, I am unsure. Best case scenario is a week. And worst case? Quinn asked. Tomorrow. The next day had arrived, and when Vorden had woken up, he had faint bags under his eyes. Quinn eventually managed to get some sleep, but he didn't seem to have fared much better either. Didn't get much sleep? Quinn asked. Vorden shook his head while looking at Peter, who seemed to still be sleeping peacefully away. At least he still looks like a human. All the first-year students had gotten the next 2 days off after the expedition. With the next 2 days off, Quinn knew he needed to hurry and find a solution for Peter's situation. It was a large city that not only had the people from the school, but the workers and soldiers outside as well. There was bound to be a morgue in the city, although crimes that lead to death did not occur, like in a regular city, since most of the citizens were soldiers, but that didn't mean there weren't any. One thing was for sure, they didn't want to get a body from the morgue in the school they were in. It would be too obvious, and another investigation would be carried out. While Quinn was thinking about what to do, a knock was heard at the door. When they opened the door, they were surprised to see Layla there. She was on her own, though, but came to update them on the situation with Aaron. "It seems like she's calmed down a bit," Layla said. "And I'll be honest, it was strange. She really wasn't upset by the fact you were a vampire, even after I tried explaining it to her, but just that you could have helped us out more during the assessment. Anyway, what about him?" Quinn then went on to explain about what had happened to Peter and how he had turned into a ghoul. When Quinn mentioned this, her face immediately dropped. She had read enough books to know some of the downsides of being in close proximity to a ghoul. Some of them were blood-hungry, starved creatures, while others constantly craved human flesh. And after hearing Quinn's explanation, it seemed like she was right. "You know, after seeing you turn Peter, I thought you were hiding something from me, but I guess this was something you were afraid of, and honestly, being a vampire is cool and all, but being a ghoul not so much," Layla said. Quinn started to think about what Layla had just said. Before everything had happened, he was seriously considering turning Layla into a vampire. However, the system had stated that this outcome, someone turning into a ghoul, was one of the options. "System, if I was to use the blood ritual on Layla, would it be the same result?" Quinn asked. "Honestly, I'm not sure. It depends on the person and the situation they were in. Perhaps Peter had turned because of how close to death he was when the ritual was formed, but maybe he would have turned into one anyway, considering how weak his mind was. I can't say that it won't happen, but I believe that Layla would have a higher chance of turning into something else." For now, Quinn decided to keep the words of the system to himself. He already had enough problems to deal with, and he didn't need another one if Layla was to turn into something else even more problematic than a ghoul. "Oh, I almost forgot," Vorden said as he went under his bed and pulled out a small bag before throwing it over to Quinn, who caught it. Quinn opened the bag and noticed that it seemed to be full of crystals. "Since the expedition ended early, we got to keep all of those." "You mean these are?" Quinn asked, with a look of excitement on his face. "Yep, the winged lizard crystals you asked for," Vorden replied, with a smile. Looking in the bag, there looked to be around 30 of them. Quinn couldn't imagine what the group must have done to be able to obtain this many. But now he realized why Aaron was incredibly upset. With this amount of crystals, their group would have come out on top of the whole leaderboard. Right now, though, he had enough crystals to create a costume for himself. The cape that Sam used was hard enough to block Quinn's blood swipes, while also being flexible. If he could use this to create a full set of clothing, then he would finally be able to fight during the day. Although at first, he wasn't sure who he could go to for help to design a costume. Suddenly someone came to mind. Logan. If there was anyone who was good at creating things and knowing if something was possible or not, he would be the one to go to. Still, he couldn't just leave Peter as he was, not with the chance of him turning into a flesh-hungry monster. Vorden could see that Quinn seemed to be struggling with something. There must have been a reason why he had told him and Layla to gather as many of those crystals as possible. "Just go do whatever you need to do," Vorden said. "Layla and I can deal with the problem. I have an idea anyway." "Are you sure? What about the others? Do you want me to pay you guys for these?" Quinn asked. "Are you joking?" Layla said. "Quinn, if it wasn't for you back then when the Dalki attacked, we would have all lost our lives, and that includes Aaron. As much as she says she's angry at you, she can't deny that you saved our lives. The least we could do is give you these crystals for free." Quinn looked at them one more time and knew that if there was anyone he could rely on, it would be Vorden, and even more so with Layla helping him. "All right, just let me know if there are any problems. I should be in the VIP area just above." After that, Quinn quickly rushed out of the room with the crystals in his hand. "In the VIP area?" Layla said. "I wonder what he's doing there." "Who knows?" Vorden said as he shrugged his shoulders. Just then, Peter was starting to wake up and rub his eyes. But right now, we have a bigger problem to deal with. Inside the second-year building, Duke was sitting down at his desk, smoking a cigar at his office. He wasn't much of a smoker, but when he was under immense pressure, he found that he tended to smoke a lot more cigars than normal. Damn, that True Dream guy is coming again, Duke said to himself. The door to the room then swung open as one of the sergeants with an afro on the top of his head and sunglasses on came walking in. His name was Raphael and was one of the teachers for the second-year students. Sir, I have brought the list of names that you asked for. Raphael then came forward and handed over a little stick to Duke. When placing it on the table, a digital display of students had appeared. Let's see. It looks like we have a good mix of abilities here, Duke said. And you've checked the background of all of these? There will be no complaints from important families if something was to go wrong, correct? Yes, sir. At the top of the list of names, one of the students' picture was being displayed. It was of a picture of Peter Chuck. It was their day off, and early in the morning, Quinn was going out to meet up with Logan. He had left both Layla and Vorden behind to keep an eye on Peter. Quinn had told them that at some point, Peter would be required to eat human flesh. It could take up to a week, but it could also be tomorrow. There was no way to know for sure. It could also be as soon as today. Vorden thought to himself, we can't be that unlucky, right? He certainly hoped this was not the case. Unfortunately, the tasks that Quinn had given to them were quite difficult. Not only did they need to look out for Peter's safety, but they also had to find a way to get human flesh without letting him find out about it. Come on, Peter, Vorden said. Let's head outside. Outside, Peter asked, his tone slightly confused. Well, if I were you, the first thing I want to do was to test out my new powers. Quinn said that you're some kind of superhuman, right? Well, why don't we take a look at what you can do now? I think that's a great idea, Layla said while bobbing up and down. Although she didn't like the sound of being turned into a ghoul, perhaps it also had its good sides. The three of them grabbed a few things and got ready to go outside. Layla even took her beast equipment with her. A lot of the students carried around their beast weapons as they walked through the city, but some chose not to, mainly because currently they were in one of the safest places on the planet. However, since the Dalki had attacked some students during the extraplanar expedition, everyone seemed to be more on edge and always ready for battle. Just as they were about to leave, Peter stopped by the entrance. Don't worry, Layla said. Even Quinn doesn't burn under the sunlight. He just feels weak and sluggish. Besides, just in case Quinn was wrong, I brought an umbrella with me. What are you doing? Peter thought to himself. You spent your whole life as a weakling, and now, just maybe, it can start to change. After convincing himself, Peter closed his eyes and stepped outside to where the sun could touch his skin. Just as Quinn had said, he didn't feel any weaker than before. He felt the same on the inside as he did outside. With this information, a smile appeared on Peter's face. At the least, he could live a somewhat normal life without having to hide in the shadows all the time. The group walked towards the park, and once they arrived, they headed deeper into the park woods. They followed the man-made trail that was often used for people to hike through, until eventually leaving the trail as they traveled farther away from the beaten path. They continued to walk until they had finally found a quiet and clear area in the woods that was devoid of trees. It was also hidden from view. This place is perfect. Besides, if anyone comes close, we will be able to hear them in time. Vorden said, what should we test first? Layla asked, how about strength and speed? Vorden said as he walked up to Layla, holding out his hand. Do you mind? Layla looked at Vorden. These days, he seemed to be more reliable than before. She still felt that he was a bit crazy in the head, but couldn't call him an outright bad person, not without any evidence anyway. Fine. She held out her hand and allowed Vorden to copy her abilities. The two of them then lifted a bunch of branches and sticks off of the ground. Because Layla's ability was quite weak, the maximum they could lift was 2 each, making it 4. Just do your best to avoid the sticks as much as you can, Vorden shouted as the two stood around 5 meters away from Peter. Looks like not only has his speed gotten better, but his reflexes as well, Vorden said. But he's still Peter. Peter nodded when he was ready, and the two of them immediately started to hover the sticks up in the air, aiming to hit Peter with them. The sticks were light, allowing Vorden and Layla to move them quite fast. They were easily as fast as regular attacks, and with 4 of them coming from different directions, it was like 2 people were fighting against Peter at the same time. For Peter, it was the first time that he felt confident during a practice. It was like he could see the attacks coming towards him. When he told his body to move, it followed what he wanted to do, avoiding the branches of sticks. It was amazing since whatever Peter thought in his head, his body reacted and did it, unlike when his body didn't respond to his thoughts against other people before. Just then, Vorden timed both sticks at the right time. When one went in for the attack, if Peter was to avoid it, the other one would be right in time to strike him. Peter pulled his body back, avoiding the first stick. Then, the second one from behind came right at his face, but he still managed to catch the second stick out of the air at the last second, just as he pulled his face back. However, the tip of the stick still managed to cut his cheek, drawing the smallest amount of blood. "Oh, sorry, Peter," Vorden yelled as the 2 of them rushed over. But by the time they reached him, the blood had fallen on the ground, and the cut that was once on Peter's cheek was no longer there. "Looks like the super healing can be checked as well," Vorden said with a smile on his face. He was actually glad that this had happened, because he was afraid that if they were to test out the super healing any other way, then it would cause Peter to grow hungrier even quicker. The next test they had for Peter was his strength. For this trial, they used a simple tree. Although Vorden was considered one of the students at the peak physical fitness for his height and age, even he wouldn't be able to damage a tree with his bare hands. That was unless he was wearing beast gear or had some type of ability to help him. "So, you wanted to just punch the tree?" Peter asked, looking at it carefully. The tree was mighty, and its trunk was thicker than Peter himself. Just imagining punching the thing, he could already feel the pain in his knuckles. "Just go for it," Layla said. "You already know that you have super healing." "But that doesn't mean that I don't feel any pain," Peter said. But he was also curious to see how much stronger he had gotten. He readied himself and looked at the tree, then pulling back his fist, he swung it outward. However, at the last second, he tried pulling back his power for fear of hurting himself. As he hit the tree, he had done so at an odd angle, causing his wrist to bend on impact. He screamed out in pain. As the 2 went to take a look, they could see that a part of his bone had come out and pierced through his skin, but at the same time, it was healing then and there in an instant. When they looked at the tree, there was a large dent that had been made. Not one large enough to cause the tree to fall over, but one that would be impossible for most humans by using their bare hands. Once Peter's wrist was healed, he started to twist it around and move it about. It seemed to be working just like normal. "Well, we know you have abnormal strength, that's for sure. But I think there's a clear difference between you and Quinn," Layla said. "What do you mean?" Peter asked, still rolling his wrist around, making sure everything worked okay. "Well, let's say if Quinn was to do the same thing, even if he didn't punch the tree dead on, his wrist probably would have been fine. I think that's because his body is stronger than that of a regular human," Layla explained. "While yours, although you have super strength, your body is still just like ours, made of regular bones and flesh. If you attack at full power, you will probably end up hurting yourself, breaking a bone just like what you did back then. Heck, even humans break their bones when they fight. So for you with your extra strength, it's a little worse. You're going to have to learn to control it." As soon as Layla had finished explaining, the wristwatch on Peter's arm started to light up. When he looked at it, he could see a voice message that had been left. "This is General Duke. Peter Chuck, you are required to come to my office in the 2nd year building immediately. I have some important things to discuss with you." As soon as Vorden heard the message, there was no longer any need for him to ask Peter who was behind everything. He had already figured it out. Why else would the head of the 2nd years have anything to do with the 1st year? The only problem now was, how could he go up against the general of a military base? An order from the general was absolute, and a strict punishment awaited those who disobeyed them. Although there weren't many rules when it came to what happened between the students themselves, the same couldn't be said for those who were above them. If you broke the rules enough times, then you would be led to an underground dungeon. The school couldn't just kick you out. Those who went in almost never came back out, and the ones who did come back came as different people. There was also a rumor that had been going around that the students who were sent into the dungeon came back without any abilities at all. Because of this, Even Vorden was worried about going up against the general of the school. Perhaps he could use his family's power to influence the military's decision about Duke, but that would require evidence and a lot more than a single testimony from Peter. So the group had no choice but to follow Duke's command. "What should I do?" Peter asked as he walked back to the military base with the other two. "We'll follow along as far as we can go. But if they see you with us, then they'll think you're no longer on their side. Just agree to whatever they ask of you for now, and we can figure out later," Vorden said. Just then, as they were about to exit the forest, Vorden suggested that Peter walk up ahead while they followed him from behind. They needed to be extra careful, just in case. But before Peter left the forest, Vorden had a few words to say. "Peter, I'm taking my chances with you this time. I don't know why, but Quinn seems to completely trust you, and while I have forgiven you, it doesn't mean I trust you. Not yet, or maybe ever." Layla nudged Vorden in the ribs. "Give the guy a break, will you?" she whispered. "He went through a near-death experience, and now he's just been told that he's a ghoul. You don't have to say out loud what he already knows." She gave Peter an encouraging smile. However, Vorden was dead serious. He still saw Peter as a liability, and if it wasn't for Quinn, he would have gotten rid of him by now. They had finally arrived at the second-year building, which was stationed on the east side of the school. From this point on, Vorden and Layla could no longer follow, as there were second-year students standing just outside, and they didn't have a good reason. Still, Peter managed to walk straight past the two second-year students, as they had been expecting him, but Vorden and Layla knew they couldn't because they would be stopped. Peter entered the building and walked into Duke's office. "Please, come and sit down, Peter," Duke said as he closed the door behind him before sitting back in his seat. "It seems the two of us haven't been able to talk since the last task I had set for you." Duke then went under his desk and pulled out several books and placed them on the table. There were 3 Earth ability books numbered from 2 up to 4. Although things didn't go quite according to plan, you still held up your end of the bargain, and I don't want to seem like a person who doesn't keep his promises, he said, smiling. If Peter didn't notice it before, he could definitely notice it now. There was something sinister about Duke's smile. Just why was he trying so hard to get rid of Vorden in the first place? Peter thought, isn't everyone on the same side to fight against the Dalki? But Peter remembered Vorden's words and grabbed the books. "Thank you, sir. Is there anything else you would like me to do?" Peter asked. "We have a visitor next week, and I'm going to need you to learn the Earth ability up to level 4. It's why I also gave you books 2 and 3. It should be easier for you to learn the abilities quickly if you do them step by step. In a couple of weeks, come back and report to me. You are dismissed." Peter then bowed down to the general before leaving the room. "Looks like I've been able to convert another one." In the end, everyone wants to be at the top, the Duke thought. As Peter left the room, he spotted Earl waiting just outside to be called in. "What are you looking at, you dog?" He snapped back. Earl still hadn't recovered from what Vorden had done to him before the outing, and because he was weaker than Vorden, he couldn't take it out on him. So he decided to take it out on Peter instead. Hearing those words and seeing Earl again, sudden images started to appear in his head, unpleasant images, very unpleasant. "Hey, I know. Why don't you wait for me out back after this? Me and the boys have a little surprise for you," Earl said. "Whatever you say, Earl," Peter replied, secretly smiling on the inside. As Peter walked down the hallway and towards the back exit of the school, he couldn't suppress the smile that suddenly appeared on his face. "I'll be waiting for you, all right." While the others were busy doing their own thing, Erin had eventually calmed down from it all. She thought back and had to admit that even if Quinn had hidden his powers in the end, he had saved their lives from the Dalki. She couldn't stay upset about not coming first. When she thought back to the image of the Dalki, her body started to shiver uncontrollably. "Calm down, Erin, deep breaths," she thought to herself. She had regained her composure, but now she started to think about Quinn a bit more. Just what was a vampire, actually? Even though Layla had tried her best to explain it, it really wasn't something she could comprehend. It didn't sound like an ability, but more like an entirely different species altogether. But the strangest thing of it all was what species could survive only on the blood of humans? Maybe I can think of them as humanoid mosquitoes. Yeah, that sounds right. They're humanoid mosquitoes. Erin thought to convince herself. If there were no humans, how would vampires survive? And what would happen to Quinn if he didn't get any blood? While she was fine with keeping Quinn's identity a secret, she was nervous about covering her own back and curious to see just how dangerous this vampire thing actually was. Eventually, that led her to the library. At first, Erin went down the nonfiction aisle to see if there was anything she could find, but there was nothing. There were no vampires, and there didn't seem to be anything close to describing them in the first place. If it wasn't in any of the official records, it was slowly starting to make sense to her why everyone wanted her to keep it a secret. This left her with no choice but to head to the fiction section, and nearly instantly, she found several novels about vampires. But just from looking at the covers, she found it really hard to tell what vampires were. Vampire, The Last Blood, Bite Me or Love Me, Thicker Than Blood. Some of the covers even seemed to have men in suggestive poses, while other books deemed vampires as vicious killers. But the one thing they all had in common was the theme around blood. Erin decided to just pick up one of the books at random. She picked up the book titled Bite Me or Love Me. She stood there in the aisle and started reading it. But before she knew it, she couldn't put the book down. My word, what are they doing? Just from reading the novel, her face started to go red. So you're interested in vampires, huh? A boy's voice said, coming from her left side. As she turned her head to see who it was, she could see a student, one she hadn't come across before, or maybe she had. Erin had a bad habit of only remembering people she cared about. But when looking at this boy, she had a feeling if she had seen him, she would have remembered him, as something was pulling her towards him. I didn't expect to see a beautiful girl like you here, the boy said as he swept back his black hair. The name's Fex. Nice to meet you. Outside the second-year building, out in the open field, Layla and Vorden were still patiently waiting. Peter had gone a while ago, but now they started to wonder what was taking him Peter so long. Do you think something might have happened to him? Layla asked, looking at the 2 second-years that stood directly outside the building like they were guard dogs. I'm not sure. He doesn't look like the type that's good at lying, Vorden replied to her question. Then again, he did fool me and Quinn before, without us having a clue. Would you stop being so salty about that? It's getting annoying, Layla said, getting sick of the fact that Vorden seemed to be putting Peter down whenever they talked about him. Right now, all of us are trying to help each other. That's how it should be. That's how this world should have been in the first place before the introduction of powers came and changed everything. Vorden could tell that there seemed to be some sort of pain behind Layla's words. Then again, it was normal for people who were the lower class to be unhappy with the current system. Before the war with the Dalki, everyone had a voice in some way. They had a right to vote, and they had the chance to change things. But after the war, that all changed. Now, if you were of a lower class, the people in power don't care about what you think. It's not the powers themselves that are at fault, Vorden replied. It's the people at the top who made the current system who were at fault. Eventually, the two of them felt they had waited for far too long. They came to the conclusion that it wasn't likely that Peter was going to come out anytime soon. They had a feeling something might have happened. With that in mind, the two of them decided to stop waiting out front and started to head around the back. There was no entrance to get into the school from the back, since the second-year building was up against the school walls which surrounded the entire military camp. But perhaps they could find some other entrance, either by climbing some walls or through some other means. The two of them needed to be careful that they weren't seen while they were sneaking around, so the two of them would be using Layla's abilities to make sure of that. When they got around to the backside of the building, they could see another student standing guard there. Using Layla's powers, they both lifted up a couple of stones and threw them to distract the student. Are you ready? Layla asked with a smile on her face. When she realized what kind of face she was making, she quickly stopped. She couldn't believe she was actually having fun sneaking around and causing trouble, and with Vorden of all people. As I thought, you do look a little cute when you are smiling, Vorden said as a response. Peter was patiently waiting outside the place where he had suggested. While waiting, Peter started to look around the place. Since there were no exits, there weren't many students moving about back here. There was also a plain wall, but it was nearly impossible for someone to scale unless they had some type of ability. As Peter continued to look at the wall, he was wondering if he, in his current state, could do such a thing. But just as he was in the middle of this thought, he heard a voice from behind. Hey, Peter, it's been a while, hasn't it? Earl said, as he walked closer before adding, "You know, lately, Duke has been blaming me for all of the failed attempts against Vorden, so I haven't been getting any rewards. How are you going to solve that for me?" While walking closer towards Peter, Earl looked at what was in Peter's hands, which were the level 2, 3, and 4 Earth ability books. Although Earl was already a level 4 Earth user and had no need for the books himself, he could always sell them on the market to earn some money. "Hand them over, you piece of crap," Earl said as he slapped Peter across the face, leaving a red mark. The truth was, Earl didn't really care about the books, and if he asked for them, then Peter was likely to give them to him. All he wanted to do was vent out his pin-up frustrations on someone, and Peter was the perfect target. Just a few moments ago, Duke did not give him any reward for his efforts, unlike what he had promised. Did he fail his task? Earl pondered. Not at all. He managed to convince Peter to push his friend, just like they had asked. With that in mind, why wasn't he being rewarded for it? On top of that, after everything he had gone through, he had been beaten up by Aaron. Soon after that, his friends had abandoned him, saying they no longer wanted to help him. To them, it was too dangerous, and they didn't want to get hurt by Aaron as well. Then, later on, he was further punished by Vorden. He still couldn't sleep right after what Vorden had done to him. Peter looked at the mark on his face. Usually, in a situation like this, his hands would be shaking. In the past, he had been so mentally broken that even Earl raising his hand would make him flinch, but not today. Something felt different. After the scenes of Earl's neck being ripped out had appeared in his head, strange thoughts started to appear in his mind. What if I could make that a reality? Peter thought. Earl then proceeded to kick Peter in the stomach before grabbing him by the collar and throwing him onto the ground. Peter was now in a space between two buildings, namely the second-year building and one of the storage rooms. It was a place that was quite dark, and unless someone purposely went around the back to find them, no one would find out. Well then, isn't this a quiet little place for the two of us to carry on our usual business? Earl asked with a smile. Peter then stood up and responded with a smile. Indeed, it is. After distracting the students who were standing by the side of the building, using the floating stones, they were able to gradually make their way towards the back of the second-year building without being seen. When they arrived, they didn't see anything. It was totally empty. Nothing was there. Even the set of windows they saw was too high for them to climb up to. "Come on, let's keep looking," Layla said. "There must be some way to get into the school." They looked around, but unfortunately they didn't find anything until Vorden spotted a little alleyway just between the second-year building and the storage room. "Maybe there's a pipe or something we can use to climb up to the windows." "You have been watching way too many martial arts movies," Layla said. Still, they decided to check it out now that they were here anyway. They had already come this far, and the least they could do is try everything before giving up. As they made their way to the space between the two buildings, they started to hear strange sounds. Certain cracking and gobbling noises were made, as if some type of wild dog was wolfing down its meal. Finally, they turned the corner, only to see Peter there. However, he wasn't alone. His hands and mouth were covered in blood, while a dead body, wearing a student's uniform, laid in front of him. The student's body had parts of its limbs torn off. Also, some bones with little bits of flesh still attached could be seen, and they looked as if someone had hungrily ripped the meat right off the bone. "Peter," Layla said, "what have you done?" The VIP dorm rooms of the first year's building were on the 3rd floor. Quinn had decided to head here to meet someone. That someone was, of course, Logan, as he was the only VIP Quinn knew, although he wasn't sure if Logan could even help him or not. Quinn's plan was to use the winged lizard crystals to create some type of costume or suit that would cover his entire body. He needed a flexible material so it could wrap around him, but he also needed it to be strong enough to survive in a fight. It was easy enough for him to find a black suit that covered his entire body that would help him avoid the sunlight. The problem was the second Quinn would be hit and the suit ripped, then he would be weakened by the sun again. That's why, when he learned of Sam's cape through the VR game, he had come up with an idea. Now that he had the materials, the only problem left was to craft a costume out of them. Most blacksmiths and tailors had a blueprint they would follow. These blueprints specified the techniques used and which materials needed to be mixed when creating weapons and armor. But because Quinn was asking for something that hadn't been made before, he would have to ask someone at the expert designer level to custom make one for him. This would be very costly, and even if he sold all the crystals and used up the ones in his hand, he wouldn't have enough to pay the cost. This led him to Logan. He saw how many crazy things Logan seemed to create for himself in his room. He thought perhaps he might have an idea, or if not, he might be able to introduce him to someone who could do it at a lower price. At first, Quinn knocked on the door, but there seemed to be no answer. It was strange because for the week that Quinn trained using Logan's machine, he hadn't seen him leave the room once. When trying to push the door open, he was surprised to see that it wasn't locked nor shut properly. "Hello," Quinn asked as he crept into the room. Just at the other end of the room, he could see Logan in his chair. He had some sort of metallic tool glove in his right hand, while a giant pair of goggles seemed to be hovering over his eyes. Oh, he was just busy as usual, Quinn thought to himself. Quinn then started to look around the room at all the gadgets around him. He knew when Logan was in his concentration mode, no matter what you did, you wouldn't get his attention. So the best thing to do was just to wait until he was done. While walking around the room, Quinn continued to look at all the storage devices, and whenever he found something interesting, he could use his inspect skill. What he noticed was some of the devices the system didn't seem to have any clue what it was, while for other items, it would give basic descriptions, such as what materials the item was made from. For the others, it would simply show a line of. These were items that Logan had uniquely created and didn't exist in the world. But there was one thing they all had in common, and that was the name of the creator, Logan Dyson. But as Quinn was looking around, he spotted a strange, circular object on one of the shelves. It stood out compared to the rest, because most of the things in the room seemed to be covered in dust, but not this one. It was a square-shaped device, no bigger than a laptop, and on the top, it seemed to have some type of digital display. Inspect. A return portal device. When the correct access code has been entered, it will return you to the destination that has been preset. Creator Richard Eno. Quinn moved in to take a closer look. It seemed to be the only item that wasn't made by Logan, and on top of that, it was a teleporter, but it was one that he had never seen before. The portal teleporters they currently carried were quite large devices, but this one was small and compact, as if the technology was ahead of their current time. Quinn reached out to grab it, but just then a voice from behind spoke to him. "Hey, if you want to get your fingers blown off, then please be my guest, carry on and touch it," Logan said sarcastically. His seat was turned around and he was staring at Quinn. "Then again, I would love to see which ability is stronger, mine or yours." He continued. "Sorry about that," Quinn said as he pulled back his hand. "It looks kind of interesting. What is it exactly?" When Quinn finished talking, the robotic gauntlet that was on one of Logan's hands started to break down. It appeared to break into smaller parts until they looked like little bugs. Then the bugs went over to where Quinn was. They grabbed the case and brought it over to Logan. "This thing has been the bane of me and my family's life," Logan said, looking around it. "As you know, my family are originals who hid their abilities from the world. Before the war started, they were researchers who worked privately for different corporations. Sometimes even governments, different armies, and all sorts of companies. Anyway, on one of their trips around 50 years ago, they discovered this device. At the time, no one knew what it was, and it seemed like our ability didn't work on it either. Of course, my family tried to research it, and eventually when we discovered the Dalki technology, we found similarities between this and the Dalki technology. It appears to be some type of teleporter. But the question is, why Dalki technology would exist on Earth before they even arrived? Then that just brings us even more questions. Why did the Dalki attack us? Were they here before? But did we just never know about it? Hearing all of these questions were causing Quinn to think about it. Perhaps Logan was onto something before he would have taken everything the government had told him as fact. He knew they hid things. Governments always did. But just like his vampire system, were they hiding even bigger secrets from the public? Anyway, Logan said, "It's not like I'm expecting you to know any of these answers. The one thing we do know is whoever was able to create a compact teleporter such as this is a genius. Oh, how I wish I could meet him one day." "Wait, what did you say?" Quinn replied. "Did you say you don't know who created it?" "Of course I don't. If I did, my family and I would have been chasing him for generations." This made Quinn sink even deeper in thought. Richard Eno was a well-known scientist, the person who had discovered not only the power of beast crystals, but also how the Dalki portals worked. Could he have really known everything all along? Right now, though, this was too big of a problem to solve, especially for someone like him. He was just one person in this whole thing, and he had his own problems to deal with. Anyway, Logan said, "What did you visit me here for? Did you want to play the game again?" "Actually," Quinn said, "I was wondering if you could help make me a suit." Quinn had explained the specifics of the suit he wanted of Logan. He elaborated on how it needed to be made using the crystals he had obtained, and how he needed it to completely cover him from head to toe, making sure that no sunlight could touch him. At first, Logan had some good news for Quinn. "Well, it seems you've come to the right person," said Logan. "I can design you one myself." "Really?" Quinn asked, surprised. "Of course, it will be easier than making some of my other contraptions, since most of them are powered by beast crystals anyway. I know my way around them. The fusion process I am using is also one of a kind," he said, smiling. Logan was clearly proud of his work, and Quinn could see this. Whenever he used to come by for his training, he would often praise his inventions, even if some of them seemed pointless or a bit out there. Because of this, Logan started to have more than just professional interest in Quinn, but also started to like him more as a friend. However, like with everything, there was also a slight problem. "What about breathing and seeing?" Logan asked. "If you're going to be covered from head to toe, you won't be able to breathe. Judging from the cape you described, the material won't be breathable, and if you cover the eyes, you won't be able to see anything either. I can place a sensory display in front of your eyes. It will work like the VR game and allow you to see outside, but that doesn't solve the problem that you won't be able to breathe." Quinn then started to look around the room while trying to come up with an idea. It looked like creating this suit wasn't going to be as easy as he thought. He proceeded to spot a small figurine with a type of gas mask on it in the corner of the room. It reminded him of the mask he first used when he went out hunting. "Could we create something like this? Maybe if we put some tubes sticking out from the side or something, I can still breathe." "Yeah, that could work, but you definitely won't get any points in the fashion department," Logan replied. "Oh, and one more thing. If we could make the mask open and close, that would be great. Just in case I wanted to grab myself a quick snack while on the move," Quinn said, smiling. The two of them then sat down together. The crystals were placed in a seemingly special container while they were going through some type of melting process. Out of the 39 crystals obtained, Logan had said they would only need 30, leaving the rest for Quinn. Quinn had offered to pay for the process or even give the remaining crystals to Logan, but he kept refusing, stating that he could earn in a minute the amount of money used to create such a thing, so there was no loss on his side. On top of Logan's desk, a large metal sheet was placed. Logan then placed his hand on the sheet and closed his eyes. Just like with the gauntlet before, the metal started to break down and move, eventually turning into little metal bugs again. The metal bugs started to form a human figure until it molded something that vaguely resembled Quinn. The two of them continued to go through the design process, altering what the metal model looked like. Each time Quinn would give a suggestion, the robots would move in place. There was not much that could be done with the suit. It had to be black in color and fit skin tight. However, the mask could be altered greatly. When using the outfit and mask, Quinn wanted to strike fear into his opponent's hearts. He wanted something quite scary looking. They went through several designs until it was finally done. Soon after, Logan went straight to work. The beast crystals that were in the container had been liquefied, and now Logan had once again put on his tool glove. He went over to his workbench and started working straight away, listening to every detail and simultaneously thinking so much was starting to make Quinn tired. He eventually drifted off at the desk, until finally he fell asleep. After a while, Logan nudged the young man to wake up. "Hey, wake up, sleepyhead," Logan said. "It's done." As Quinn opened up his eyes, he was greeted with a metallic life-size model of him. It was in the same height and the same body proportions to him, although it had none of his facial features. But the big difference between the creation and him was the fact that it was wearing both the outfit and the mask they had designed together. "It's amazing," Quinn said as he walked over to it and started to stroke the model. The black suit was skin-tight, but had a scaled pattern like that of a snake throughout its entire surface. However, There were a few design touches added to it from Logan that Quinn hadn't asked for. "Do you like the additions that I made?" Logan asked. On the forearms going up to the shoulder, 3 red claw-like marks could be seen on both sides. Although it looked nice, Quinn was hoping for the suit to be all black in color. If he was to also use this at night, he probably would have been seen. Nevertheless, when he looked at Logan's bags and his tired face, he found it hard to say no. "It's great," Quinn replied. Still, what looked the best out of all to Quinn was the mask. It was made out of a metallic material that went over the black suit. It covered the mouth all the way to the top of the nose. On the outside, by the cheeks, 2 squares could be seen that stuck out slightly. Over the mouth, a pattern of teeth could be seen protruding. The teeth were molded outwards to look more realistic, like that of a beast. It wasn't painted on the outside, and when opened, it would look like a large beast was about to hold you in its jaws. Now, I do have to warn you. Although expensive metals were used when making this, there's a limit to how much it can endure. Logan explained. They were only basic tier crystals after all. It will fare well against intermediate weapons, but anything stronger than that, and it will be cut. Quinn made sure to make note of that, for it would be the same when facing against beasts. If he was fighting during the day, he would be sure to pick and choose his opponents. Although suddenly, Quinn's body started to feel a strange sensation. It was a similar feeling to when he consumed blood, only a tad different. His eyes started to glow once again. A strange power was surging through his body. "What the hell is happening?" Quinn thought. "Hey, are you okay?" Logan said. "Do you need me to go get a doctor or something?" As Logan stood in front of Quinn, he could see the color in his eyes change, and even Logan stepped back a bit. At the same time, little metallic bugs started to come over and built a metallic suit of his own over his body. Eventually, the bugs had completely formed a metallic suit that looked like that of a small mech suite, only without all the clunky parts and more in line with the shape of a human. These were all precautions that Logan took, just in case Quinn was to go out of control. But then, the feeling died down and his eyes returned to normal, but a message had appeared. "A family member has grown stronger." "What is this?" Quinn said. "Does this have anything to do with Peter?" Then a dreaded thought hit his head. Standing alone in the fantasy section of the library was Erin and a strange boy known as Fex. Erin was still holding a vampire love story in her hand, and her face had gone bright red as she couldn't believe someone had just caught her reading such a dirty book. How could they describe such intimate scenes in such a strange way? Although the boy in front of me seemed to have some idea of what the book was. Could it be that the boy was interested in the same type of things? She thought, quickly hoping to avoid further embarrassment. Erin put the book back where it was placed and started to walk over towards the boy. As Fex saw her walking towards him, he started to lick his lips. What a tasty-looking person, Fex thought. Looks like most of the human minds in this school are pretty weak. Erin continued to walk forward with her head down, and when she was finally close enough, she halted her steps. Fex started to smile. "Now, why don't you lift your head, so I could take another look at your pretty face?" Erin lifted her head, but dashed forward in an instant. A type of ice sword was forming in her right hand. Using her forearm, she pushed Fex up against the wall, right by his neck. The area started to freeze, and now an ice sword was pointed right at his throat. "If you tell anyone about what you saw today, you're dead. You hear me? What's with this girl? How can you just attack someone like that?" Fex cried. Erin proceeded to slowly freeze both of his hands to the wall, as well as made sure that he couldn't retaliate. Gradually, the ice from Erin's forearm was starting to spread and was freezing Fex's neck as well. "Look, I don't want to cause any trouble," he said. Erin looked at him carefully, noticing all the features that he had. "Good. I will remember you, and if anyone finds out about what you saw today, I'll be coming back for you," Erin said as she took away the ice sword. She then started her exit, leaving Fex in this sticky situation, frozen to the wall with the ice still confining his body. "Wait," he shouted. "Aren't you going to let me go?" Erin continued to walk off towards the center of the library. Without turning back, she said, "It's just a little reminder of what can happen if you don't listen." Eventually, Erin had left the library. The other people who were nearby went to look at the commotion down the aisle, wondering what was going on. However, all they could see was a single man stuck up against the wall. A few laughed and giggled, as it wasn't the first time they had seen something like this. After all, few of the braver boys among the first-year students had tried to confess their love to Erin. But she hated it when people would waste her time. They would always ask to meet in a quiet or a secret place, and Erin would always think that it was for a matter of importance to her, yet it was the same every time. They would confess their love for Erin and ask her out on a date. The usual reply she would give was to stick these, in their own eyes, love interests to the wall. She would often leave them there frozen in place while waiting for the ice to melt. She did this as a warning for other suitors in the future. Slowly, people started to get the message and stopped approaching her. So, it had been a while since the other students had seen such a thing. After having a giggle, most of the students continued with what they were doing, going back to reading books or chatting away in a library. Then while no one was looking, Fex used his strength and to break free both of his arms from the ice. He then used his hands to crack the ice that was around his neck as well. Looks like someone was able to resist my charm already, Fex said. Well, now that just makes me want to go after her more. I will remember you, Ice Girl. Perhaps this place won't be so bad after all. Fex's original plan was to travel and explore the human world, to experience all the things his grandpa had told him. But his plans were quickly stopped once he was caught. When he woke up, he was in front of General Nathan. They had explained to him what had happened and why he was brought there, how he had become a suspect of draft evasion. However, Nathan did say that as long as he contacts his guardians, inform them, and show proof of his age, they would let him go free. But this was not an option for Fex. He was a lot more scared of his father and the others than he was off the humans. If he was to be found right now, he couldn't imagine the horrible things that his father would do to him. Besides, this was his only chance to experience what life was like as a human. When Fex thought all things were going well, Nathan had asked a question which was difficult for him to answer. Well, since you claim to no longer have any parents or such, there is just one thing I need you to do. Fill out this form for me, and we will get you starting your lessons as soon as possible. Nathan said. A digital display then appeared in front of Fex's face with a little digital keyboard. It asked for basic details such as name and date of birth. For both of these things, Fex didn't use his real information, but then there was one more question that was asked that caused him a pause. It asked him what type of ability he had. For this question, he had a plan. After checking over the details and seeing Fex's ability, there was no more work that needed to be done. A wristwatch was given to Fex before leaving. The display on the device was showing a number 1. After seeing this, Nathan no longer had any interest in him. He would leave the scouting job to Duke to entice him with higher-level ability books. The whole method Duke used didn't really sit well with Nathan, but he knew the base had a quota to hit. Not knowing what to do, and knowing nearly no one at the base, Fex decided to head to the library to update himself on current events. Although, after entering the library, he soon got distracted. He was wondering what the people of Earth had thought about vampires. He wondered if they even had any new information on them. This led him to his first real encounter with another student, Erin. The rest of the story was what got him frozen to a wall. After looking at a few books about vampires, he quickly realized that most of it was just a bunch of nonsense. They hadn't learned much about how vampires actually operated, which meant Fex had to be even more careful not to reveal their secrets. As Fex was leaving the library, he had no idea what to do. He decided that he would just have to go to his dorm room. While walking down the hallway towards the staircase, a student ran past him. As this student passed him, he caught a whiff of scent with his nose, and a familiar smell registered in his mind. It took him a while to figure out what this smell was, but when he recognized it, he realized it was very familiar to him. It was the smell of another vampire. However, he had realized this too late. When he turned his head, the student who had run past was already gone. Now, this is interesting. I wonder what family he belongs to. What on earth is he doing at this base? Fex thought. In the dark alley away from the prying eyes of others, the two of them stood there in shock as they watched Peter feasting on a human body. Even though they were now only a few feet away from them, Peter continued to rip chunks of flesh from the body and shoving it in his mouth, as if he had been deprived of food for weeks. Seeing the shocking sight, Layla could no longer stomach it. She turned her head away and felt like she was about to throw up, but before she did, Vorden grabbed her, turning her back around and looked her in the eye. "Don't throw up, keep it in. We can't leave anything behind. It would leave clues for them to find out we were here." As Vorden said these words, there was a look on his face. It almost looked like panic. Seeing the near panic on Vorden's face, Layla closed her eyes and started to imagine. Think of your happy place, Layla. Just think of your happy places. The uneasiness in her stomach started to settle, and when she opened her eyes once again, she could see Vorden was now heading over towards Peter. But when the sight of the ripped-up body came into view once again, the feeling in her stomach returned. "I think I'm just going to step out of the alley for a bit and keep watch," Layla said as she quickly rushed out. Layla seemed to be experiencing more and more gruesome things lately. When she saw that head that Dalkey threw at them, she didn't really have time to take it in before the fear of being killed herself took over. But this was different. She was able to fully take in the sight of Peter eating another person in front of her. Seeing what Peter was doing, suddenly she was starting to get second ideas about Quinn turning her into a vampire. Was it something she could really handle? The books made it seem so much easier. "Peter," Vorden said in an aggressive but quiet voice. "Peter." Suddenly, Peter seemed to snap out of whatever daze he was in. He looked at the body on the floor, and in his hand was a piece of reddish-pink flesh. He had no idea which part of the body it had come from. He immediately dropped what was in his hand and started to scurry away backwards into the alley. "Was this me?" Peter said as he thought back to what had happened just moments ago. When Earl had called out to him and had kicked him down the alley, a type of rage had consumed him. As Peter stood there looking at Earl's face, all the memories of what had been done to him started to surface once again. Everything that happened to him, just because he was weak. Well, Peter wasn't weak anymore. Earl readied his arm and went in for another slap to the face. Peter grabbed it midair and using all his strength crushed Earl's fingers. As Earl yelled in pain, the image Peter had earlier came true, making his hand into a claw-like shape, and using all the supernatural strength he had, he clawed towards Earl's neck, ripping out the jugular in one go. Then soon after, Earl had become a tasty snack for Peter. Peter would have liked to say his mind was out of it. He didn't know what he was doing, but he knew that was all a lie. For every step of the way, Peter knew exactly what he was doing. The second Earl had hit him, he knew what he had planned to do. For once he could get his sweet revenge, all the people that betrayed him, he would get rid of. They weren't needed in human society anyway. The only thing Peter didn't plan for was what happened after. When seeing Earl's body on the floor, his eyes seemed to be attracted to something. It wasn't the blood, but what lay beneath it. The pink line of muscle fiber and fatty cells. Before he knew it, he was digging in. Right now, in front of Vorden, Peter needed to keep up his act as a weak-minded boy. He was too worried what the others would think of him. If they found out he knew exactly what he had just done. Just killed someone. Peter said. "Cut the crap," Vorden said. "Now is not the time to act like this. How long has he been dead for?" "What do you mean?" Peter replied. "I said how long? It's important, Peter. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. The panic in Vorden's voice seemed to be getting urgent. "I don't know. Maybe 10 minutes, I would say," Peter answered. Vorden then rushed over to the body, if you could still call it that, as it was now complete, ripped up into little pieces. It was hard to recognize what was what, apart from the main body parts. But then Vorden found what he was looking for. The wristwatch. Using his powers, he lifted the watch into the air before throwing it in a random direction as far as he could. Wasting no time, he then grabbed Peter by the arm and dragged him out of the alley. "We have to get out of here now," he said with urgency in his voice. As the two were running, they quickly saw Layla, and she too could see Peter with blood all over his uniform. "What's happening?" Layla asked. "We have to go now," Vorden shouted. She didn't ask any more questions, and the three of them quickly ran away from the second-year building. Once they were out of there, they quickly headed towards the park where they were before, but they weren't rushing this time. Vorden stayed in front, going out from time to time, while asking the other two to stay back. When the area was clear, they would walk again until they finally returned to the open spot in the forest where they were practicing a while ago. "Take off your clothes now," Vorden said. "What? But then everyone will see me naked," Peter replied. Vorden then walked over to Peter and started ripping the clothes off him. By now, he had lost his patience with Peter. He knew something like this would happen sooner or later. "Get off," Peter said. "I can do it myself." Using both of his hands, he shoved Vorden with quite some strength, but Vorden stayed on his feet. Taking a step back, Vorden then allowed Peter to take off his own clothes. "What was the big rush back there? We just left the body in the alleyway. Won't the school find out that a student died?" Layla asked. "We had no choice," Vorden replied. "Maybe if we had gotten there a little earlier, we could have done something, taken a body with us. But once the watch is taken off of or detects no sign of life, it pings a message to the school. Fortunately for us, the watch waits a full 5 minutes before sending this type of thing. That's why I was in a rush. If we were seen, there's nothing we can do. At least now, we won't be caught. But what about the body? Won't they search for whoever did this?" Just as Layla said this, the sound of leaves ruffling on the floor could be heard as another person entered this part of the forest. It was a student holding an umbrella in his hand. "What body are you guys talking about?" Quinn asked. Once the strange feeling that had come over Quinn's body had disappeared, a message appeared, one stating that a family member of his had gotten stronger. There was no need to ask the system what the message meant because he could feel it, the strange sensation and connection between him and Peter. It was a similar feeling to when he consumed blood, but it wasn't him getting stronger, it was Peter. "I'm sorry, Logan. Thanks for all your help, but I don't have time to talk now. I have got to go," Quinn shouted. He went up to the mannequin that contained the mask and the suit and immediately put them into his dimensional void, and, just like with his other beast equipment, they had been registered with his shadow equip, so he was able to put the costume on and off whenever he wanted. Just as Quinn was about to leave the door, he turned and looked at the workbench. On top, there were several different mask designs, all a little different from each other. They were the different designs he and Logan had come up with until they felt like one of them was best. "Hey, Logan, if it's not too much trouble, do you think you could complete the other mask designs for me?" Logan chuckled to himself. "Are you kidding me? I could finish them all by the end of today if I wanted to." Quinn smiled back and looked at the bags under his eyes. He could tell that Logan had worked hard on the costume and hadn't even rested since finishing it. "Logan, I promise I'll pay you back for all this one day. As soon as I find out anything about this situation, I'll let you know." With that, Quinn ran down the hallway and down the staircase, rushing over to where Peter was. Although he had no clue where Layla and Vorden had taken him, it felt like the system or a part inside of him was telling him where Peter was. If he went towards the right direction, the connection grew stronger. If he headed in the wrong direction, it felt weaker. It was similar to playing a game of hot and cold. Without slowing down, Quinn ran down the stairs and out the hallway, ignoring everyone he went past. But for the first time, a strange scent entered his nose. It was unusual for Quinn, as he had never smelt this before. Ever since he had turned into a vampire, all of his senses seemed to improve apart from his taste, but he could also say it was just heightened in other areas. Still, this smell was completely different to everyone else around him, and he didn't know why. If he wasn't in such a rush and panic, he would have turned around to see just who was giving off such a strange smell. Before leaving the school, he grabbed a random umbrella at the entrance. Often people would forget their umbrellas after a day of rain, leaving it out to dry. This made things a lot easier for Quinn. Once he had left the academy, he continued to listen to his body, following the connection, which eventually led him to the park and finally inside the forest. As he arrived, he managed to hear the last few words that Layla had said. However, there wasn't much to ask. Judging by the system's message, Quinn could guess what had already happened. And seeing the bloody clothes in Vorden's hands and the marks of dried blood on Peter's hands and mouth, he already knew. Peter had eaten human flesh and most likely killed someone in the process. While Quinn wanted to blame Peter for his actions, he really couldn't. Quinn was the one who turned him into this creature, and he knew exactly what it was like. When Quinn had turned into a vampire, he too was unable to control his lust for blood and ended up biting Layla in the process. It was just unfortunate that for Peter his needs were human flesh, which usually turns out fatal for the person being eaten. As Vorden was exiting the forest from where Quinn had gone, he whispered into Quinn's ear, "You need to do something about him, and fast." As soon as he said those words, he continued to exit the forest with the clothes in his hands while shouting, "I'll get rid of these. You guys look after Peter. Now can one of you please tell me what happened? Quinn asked. Meanwhile, Vorden made sure to cover the clothes as best as he could. When wrapped and piled in a bundle, it was easy to cover most of the blood marks. He entered the school without being seen and headed back to the dorm room, where he put all of the bloody clothes into a plastic bag, including his own. Then from his and Peter's closets, he grabbed a change of clothing. Luckily, the school supplied them with plenty of uniforms, mainly because of how much fighting went on at the school. Although if you went through too many, you would eventually have to pay for it yourself. With a new set of clothes for Peter in one bag and the bloody clothes in the other, he needed to find a way to get rid of the evidence. Just as he was walking down the hall and thinking what to do about it, he spotted someone who would make his life a lot easier for him. "Hey, Berg," Vorden said. "How are you doing?" Placing the bag in his left hand into his other hand, he touched Berg on the shoulder and successfully copied his flame abilities. "Oh, Vorden," Berg said with a fake smile on his face. "It's so nice to see you. About those crystals, you don't have to worry about giving them back. Think of it as a gift for my family to yours." "Oh, thanks, I was just coming to check if that was okay with you," Vorden replied. But while Vorden was doing his best to fake a conversation, he noticed that many of the students in the hallway were gossiping about something. "Did you hear about what they found?" One of the students said. "You mean the thing they found behind the second-year building?" Another replied. "Yeah, all the students are outside, while the school's investigation team is trying to find out what happened. I think maybe a student got killed. Inside the school. Isn't this like the second case this year? Maybe we should start worrying if a beast got through the portals or something." Vorden took this opportunity to break away from Berg and head to a place where he wouldn't be seen. It was quieter around the first-year building now, since most of the students had moved to the second-year building. They tried to see what was going on, or if they couldn't get close, they were asking other students about it. Using this opportunity, Vorden was able to sneak off into a secluded area and burn all of the evidence without anyone noticing. "I just hope there wasn't anything we forgot about." Several soldiers were standing outside the second-year building. They were blocking all the entrances both at the front and back side of the building. During the investigation, all the second-year students were ordered to gather outside on the field in front of the second-year building. A lot of rumors were going around in the crowd of students. They were all wondering what was going on. The second-year teachers started the investigation because they were the first on the scene. When they discovered that it was actually a first-year student who had died, they called in the first-year teacher and handed over the investigation to them. At the back of the building, in the alley, Faye and Haley were currently investigating the scene together. Looking around the gruesome scene of the murder, Haley and Faye were reminded of things they had seen on the battlefield during the war. That's how bad it looked to them. Because they were both war veterans, they had become immune to this kind of blood and gore. As Haley was kneeling on the floor and examining body parts, she seemed to be unaffected by the whole thing. She was picking up bloody bones and bits of flesh like she was checking out some clothes in a fashion store. After she had looked around for a while, it seemed like she had spotted something interesting. She started to pick up body parts one by one and place them in a specific order. Some of them she lined up in a row so she could examine them in more detail. Looking at what Haley was doing, Faye said, "Are you trying to piece them back together or something? I noticed something strange about all the parts I've gathered and lined up. They all have one thing in common," Haley replied. "As far as I can see, the only thing they have in common is that they're spattered with blood all over." "So what did you notice? Do you think it was some type of beast that came through a portal? Or maybe it is a student with an unusual ability?" Faye asked as she looked around. She was trying to see what Haley had noticed. Haley picked up one of the body parts which looked like part of a leg. She then showed it to Faye and said, "You see this here?" while she pointed at 2 puncture marks. For the most part, it looks like who or whatever did this used some type of claw to dig into the student's flesh, but on some body parts, one noticed those puncture wounds that look like teeth marks. Haley continued, "Sometimes the flesh is ripped from the body in whole chunks, but sometimes it looks like something chewed on it." In a soft voice, she whispered to herself, "It probably wasn't to taste the blood." "Okay, I see what you're saying," Faye said with confusion on her face. "But doesn't that only confirm our theory that it was a beast that did this?" "Well, the thing is, this isn't the first time that I've seen these kinds of marks. Do you remember when we went through the red portal and we discovered the true dream member?" Haley asked. "Well, he wasn't the only one. I've seen the same marks on other students in the sickbay before. You're not saying those two students could have anything to do with it, are you? Faye asked incredulously. I'm not saying that they're the culprit, but whatever it is, it's clearly following them around or linked to them in some way. Haley replied, once this investigation is over, it looks like we will have to call the two of them in for some more questioning. Once Vorden had returned to the park, he also explained what had happened on the way there, such as how the news had already spread and regarding the investigation of the scene. After cleaning Peter up with a few bottles of water and changing his clothes, they all went back to the dorm room together. Inside the first-year building dorm room, the group had gathered. Vorden, Peter, Quinn were all sitting down. Layla, on the other hand, couldn't stop pacing around and was nervously fidgeting with her hair. Damn it, Layla shouted. Now that I've witnessed everything, I'll be called an accomplice. If they find out about this, we could be put in the dungeon. What'll I tell my parents then? It was the first time the group had seen Layla so freaked out. Although she tended to overreact to things at times, it never seemed like she couldn't deal with the situation. However, this time, she was very worried and agitated. Peter, I think you owe us an explanation, Vorden said. Fair enough, if you were hungry and needed to eat something, but why didn't you come to us? You knew we were waiting for you outside. This is the second time that you've done something like this. I'm sorry, I don't know what came over me, Peter said. When the hunger grew and Earl slapped me, I just lost control. When I finally regained control, I was already eating his corpse. I don't know what happened in between. Peter turned out to be quite an impressive actor. He looked frightened and worried, and everyone there bought it. Even Vorden believed him in the end, even though he was unsure at first. Although, there was one exception. He's lying, the system said. What do you mean? Quinn asked. Remember how I said that he would be required to eat human flesh? The worst-case scenario would be him losing control tomorrow. Even then, the process would have been slower than this. He would have gotten hunger pangs first, and later he would slowly become unstable. You would have also felt the connection between the two of you grow weaker as he got more hungry. If you want to find out the truth, here is my advice. This is what you need to do. Quinn then stepped forward in front of the others, with a serious look on his face as he confronted Peter. You need to tell me the truth, Peter. Why did you kill him? As Quinn asked this question, he bit down on his thumb using his phone. He then lifted his hand, and like some type of magnet, Peter was attracted to it. Peter immediately leapt up from where he was and started to suck on Quinn's thumb, absorbing the blood into his body. The connection between the two started to grow stronger again, and both of their eyes started to glow. Stop, stand back, Quinn said in an authoritative voice, making Peter do as he was told and stand back. Now tell me, why did you kill that student? Quinn again used that authoritative voice. Peter's eyes lit up red, and he felt like an urge to answer truthfully. It was like a magic truth spell. It forced Peter to be truthful with his master. He immediately started telling Quinn the truth. Earl, if it was anyone that deserved to die, it was him. Any day, whenever I was on my own, and when your backs were turned from me, he would come to torture me. If I didn't obey, he would snap my fingers. Then, they had a healer come by and heal it again, proceeding to repeat the process of torturing me. Peter articulated his reasoning, sighing before continuing. He saw me as an easy target. If I wanted to get away from the pain, I had no choice but to follow his orders. After I met with Duke, I got rewarded with the ability books, but he didn't get anything from Duke, so he wanted to take his anger out on me. He took me to that alley with a plan to beat me, just to satisfy his own need to be in control. But this time I finally had the power to fight back, so I decided to show him he can't mess with me anymore. He had it coming, and he deserved everything he got. Eating him was just a little bonus, and I might have overdone it a bit. Hearing the truth come out of Peter's mouth made Quinn feel a lot better. If he had done it for pleasure, or because his mind had been overcome with the hunger for human flesh, it would have made Quinn truly fearful. However, Peter had a good reason, even though it was a bit extreme. At the moment, the way the school and the whole world worked, anyone who suddenly rose in power drastically would stand up and retaliate to their suppressors. It was just the way the system worked. Of course, this didn't happen very often, because most people didn't have a way to grow in power faster than their oppressors. not like Quinn and Peter anyhow. Peter, your actions aren't wrong. And if I was in your shoes, I would have done the same thing, Vortin said. But here's where you and I are different. Your actions also put Quinn in danger. If you're caught, there's always a chance that it could lead back to him. And what's even more, we are involved as well. Vortin glared at Peter before continuing, I plan to take my revenge on Duke and Momo in our second year. But when I do, I will do it carefully, so no one else gets hurt. When Vortin said this, he was also talking about himself. What happened to Peter made him feel like it was a reflection of his own actions. It was only because Vortin chose to hang out with them, which upset the order of things at the school, and then started to target the second years, that Duke seemed to have it out for him. And to get close to Vortin, he targeted his friends first. It was the reason why he couldn't completely blame Peter for his actions. With everything out in the open, there was no more use talking about it. It was best if they never spoke of what happened again, but all of them knew that it would have to be brought up soon. System, is there any way for Peter to stop consuming meat? Any way at all? Quinn asked. Of course there is, but you're not going to like the answer I'm about to give you. The system said, just like yourself when you consume blood, you grow stronger. The same goes for Peter when he eats human flesh. Although for him, there is a limit. Eventually, he will grow so strong that he will be able to evolve and will no longer require human flesh. As the system said, Quinn didn't like this answer at all. The solution to Peter no longer requiring to eat human flesh was to eat more human flesh. The next day seemed to be more regular than the others thought it would be. The students still talked about the events that happened at the second-year building, but the area was quickly cleared up and the second-year students were allowed to enter the building once again. Although it didn't stop from rumors spreading between the students, and eventually an announcement had been made updating everyone on the situation. It was an emergency announcement, so each student got sent the same voice message via their watch. The message said that a beast had escaped through one of the portals and has been dealt with. They are investigating how a beast was able to get through such a thing, so the same mistakes were to not occur again in the future. Luckily for the military, Earl had come from a no-name family, and his death wouldn't have any direct consequences whatsoever on the school. The next day had arrived, and the usual suspects were inside the same room, once again all deciding on what to do with Peter. So, do you feel hungry right now? Layla asked. Not any more than usual when I wake up, Peter replied. Vortin and Quinn had already brought plenty of raw food for him to eat, and for now, it seemed to have been working in suppressing his hunger. The only problem was the system's words seemed to worry Quinn even more. Now that Peter has had a taste for human flesh, the chances of his hunger for it would come back even quicker. The only problem was they didn't know how long Peter would have lasted before eating human flesh. If it was a week until he went crazy, then the system would have been able to give a good estimate of when Peter would need food again. But because Peter had chosen to kill out his own choice and had eaten before starving, it was unable to give a good estimate. This thought was on the back of everyone's minds. Guys, relax, Peter said nervously. I won't be doing anything like that again, and Quinn can testify to that as well. I promise, as soon as I get hungry again, I'll let you guys know straight away. Still, Vortin said, that doesn't solve our problem of feeding you when you do need to be fed. We may have gotten away with it this time, but we need something consistent. The other three thought long and hard of what their options could be. Honestly, though, Vortin did have a plan, but it was a last resort. He still didn't trust Peter and wanted to see just how loyal he would be, and only then, if all the options had been thought of, would he tell them his plan. Have you tried drinking coffee? Layla asked. Coffee? The others thought. It was a bit of a random suggestion. Oh, well, don't worry. I just read about it in a book once. Don't mind me. Layla said, smiling away. What about the cemetery or even a morgue? The city has one. Quinn had actually thought of these suggestions early, but once again the system had informed him of bad news. The meat being used had to be fairly fresh, to the point where it was being eaten off the bone or if someone had died recently. But there weren't many people who would die in the military city just like that. It wasn't like a regular city, which had high levels of crime and an old population. Also, the consequences of getting caught just trying to do that didn't sit well with the others, but it was much better than getting caught in the middle of killing another student. The pressure was getting to Quinn. It felt like he was about to pull his hair out. No matter what, he couldn't think of a good way. The only solution he could come up with was killing more people, and if he was to do so, he needed to start making a list of those who deserved it. "Quinn, relax," Vorden said. "I have an emergency situation if it comes to it. For now, spend your day like normal while Layla and I will try to come up with something. If it doesn't work out, then we can use my backup plan." "What is the backup plan?" Layla asked. Vorden then called Quinn over and whispered into his ear while looking at Layla out of the corner of his eye. It was clear he was doing this just to get one up on her. He had a plan that would help Quinn out while she didn't. Layla couldn't help but tap her foot and stare at Peter angrily in the corner of the room. "Vorden, I can't let you do that," Quinn said. "As I said, only if it comes to it. It's the only thing that won't put us in any danger," Vorden replied. Although Vorden had helped Quinn through this process, what he was suggesting was just too much. While Vorden and Layla were basically babysitting Peter, Quinn was left to do his own thing. Whatever happened, he didn't want Vorden to go through with his plan. So the only thing he could think of was the hospital. There were plenty of cases where soldiers would get injured in mock battles or out on expeditions during portal training, and sometimes there would be lethal damage. Some might also catch a disease of some sort. It was the only place Quinn could think of which would have the freshest, but at the same time almost dead people in the city. But while Quinn was outside, he decided to stop off at a certain spot. He was back in the park at the open area in the forest, where the others had trained with Peter. The reason for him being here was because before doing anything, Quinn needed to make sure he was fine first. He threw his umbrella that was hanging over his head on the ground. As the light touched his skin, the normal system message had appeared. "You are being hit by direct sunlight. All stats will be reduced by 70%. Shadow equip," Quinn called out. The shadow started to wrap around his whole body this time, and after a few seconds later, the black suit that Logan had designed covered his entire body, and the demon-like mask was planted on his face. "You are no longer being affected by sunlight. All stats have returned to normal." It was a success. The outfit had worked and had done what it was designed for, but there was still one thing Quinn needed to get used to. The outfit covered his whole body from head to toe, and that included his eyes. As a replacement, Logan had installed some virtual eyes, and the outside looked like that of an evil demon. Logan wanted the outfit to match Quinn's shadow ability, so he thought there was nothing better than to make him look like a shadow demon, with his white, glaring eyes and demon-like mask, then the red claws running up the side of his arms. He truly did look like something out of a kid's nightmare. The vision the eyes gave was nearly just as good as a regular human eyesight, but it seemed to be a little slow compared to Quinn's. If it was him before then, it would have been fine, but right now, the virtual eyes clearly put him at a slight disadvantage compared to him at night. Although the suit also had a night mode, which allowed Quinn to lower the top half of the suit so his head could get some fresh air, while his face was still mostly covered by the metallic mask. Even though the suit wasn't needed at night, it still gave him extra protection, so it was best to use it when he could. Quinn was over the moon, as now there was no longer any need to hide his shadow ability from others. After testing out his new suit, Quinn tried using his shadow abilities and blood abilities to check if they worked as normal as possible. Everything seemed to be just as good and strong as he was usually. On top of that, it didn't seem to slow down his movements at all, as the material was very flexible. He was very happy with the suit and end result. He just couldn't thank Logan enough for making it. He put it back away in his shadow void and decided to start heading towards the hospital. Luckily for him, he was able to enter the hospital with no problems. He could walk around as if he was a normal citizen heading to the certain room. But as he did walk around, there was something that Quinn noticed that the hospital had that the school didn't. In nearly every corner of the room, there was a round object with a blinking red light. They were cameras. The schools weren't allowed to install cameras due to the originals fearing that their ability might get copied or their technique stolen. However, that wasn't the same for around the city. The student wouldn't be practicing their skills in the hospital, so there wasn't any reason why cameras couldn't be installed there. This was a major problem. If Quinn or the others were to try to take anything, they would be caught on camera. And he couldn't use the suit otherwise. When he revealed himself, everyone would know it was him. There was the option of using Shadow Cloak. Although that made him invisible, the same couldn't be said for objects he or others were touching. The camera would pick up a floating figure and then report it, which would lead to another investigation. Still, it was an option, but right now, it looked like Vorden's plan was looking like the best one. With nothing else to see, Quinn decided to head back, although while doing so, he couldn't help but notice all the blood bags around him. Imagine finding that room. It would be an instant power increase. Although for now, he couldn't think about it. Maybe if there was ever an emergency that required him to get stronger, regardless if he was caught or not, he would come back here. Just as Quinn was leaving the hospital, a voice message seemed to appear on his watch. There wasn't even an option for him to listen to it or not, as it immediately started to play. Quinn Talen, you are to report to General Nathan's office immediately. If you are not here in the next 30 minutes, then we shall have guards come and escort you here immediately. The message ended and Quinn couldn't help but feel nervous. Had they found out about him being a vampire? Or maybe Peter had been found and he had been ratted? Although he had all these thoughts, at the end of the day, he had no choice but to comply. It was impossible to escape from the military base. Doing his best to make it back to the school as quick as he could, Quinn had finally made it in time. He stood in front of Nathan's office and gave a knock before entering. "Come in," Nathan said. As Quinn entered through the door, he could see Nathan standing there with Haley and Faye in the room. But that wasn't what worried him. The person that worried him the most was the female who sat at the desk in front, for he had seen her once before a while ago. It was a person whose abilities could tell if one was lying or not. "Please, Quinn, take a seat," Nathan said, while Quinn was at Nathan's office. The other three were still in the room together. "I'm going to head out for a bit. There's something I need to do, just in case we can't come up with anything," Vorden said. "Do you mind telling me what this backup plan is?" Layla asked. "Trust me, even if you did know, it wouldn't be possible for you, and I don't think you would want to do it. Why don't you try me?" she said with a smug look on her face. Vorden then walked towards the door to leave the room where Layla was standing, and as he walked past, he whispered the plan into her ear. After hearing Vorden's plans, her eyes opened wide, and her face dropped to the floor. At that moment, her whole opinion of Vorden had changed. In fact, what he said was true. If it was her in a situation, she was unsure if she could do the same thing. With Vorden gone to make sure his backup plan was ready if all else failed, this left Peter and Layla alone in the room together. The two of them weren't exactly the closest, but the problem was with what had happened last time when the two of them had talked. Layla had told Peter off and even called him disappointing, but she saw him in a different light ever since he had sacrificed himself for Quinn. As the two of them sat there awkwardly in silence, Layla was starting to miss the crazy boy a bit. At least he was a conversation starter. Some time had passed, and the two of them started doing the things they would usually do. Layla brought out a book and started reading, while Peter lay there thinking about how much he changed. All the pain he had suffered from Earl had gone just like that. In an instant, Peter was able to get rid of him, and Peter didn't feel bad for killing him, but instead felt like he had done something good. If Quinn had this power all along, why didn't he do anything? It's wasted on him, Peter thought. As they continued to do their own thing, a rumbling sound was heard. It immediately made Layla jump from the bed she was on and look for the door. "Peter," she eyed him warily. "You're not getting hungry, are you?" Peter wanted to lie. He wanted to tell her it was okay, that nothing was happening. But the force of Quinn's blood ran deep into his veins, and he felt compelled to keep his word to Quinn about telling them if he was feeling a certain hunger. "I think it's starting," Peter admitted. It was late in the afternoon, and the sun was still shining outside. However, soon it would be dinner time for most of the students. While some were outside having dinner with their friends, others chose to have a meal at the school canteen. It was in the canteen that Vorden was at this moment. He had already done what he needed to do to complete his plan. After gathering some information from the other students, it had led him to the canteen. And now all he needed to do was head back to Peter. Although Quinn said it was unlikely he would get hungry within one day after feeding, there was still a possibility that something could happen today, which meant Vorden would have to make sure his backup plan was ready each and every day. After grabbing a snack for himself to eat from the canteen, he headed back up to the dorm room to check on the others. As he opened the door, though, he was surprised to see Layla standing in the corner of the room while having her bow pointed at Peter. Peter himself had both of his hands up and was as far away from Layla as possible inside the little room. "Whoa, what is going on here?" Vorden asked. But before either of the two could say anything, a message was received on Vorden's watch. "Vorden Blade, you are to head to Nathan's office immediately. Judging by your location, you should be able to reach us in 5 minutes. If you are not here, then prepare to face the consequences." "What is this about?" Vorden said. "You heard the message, I've got to go. And you too. Stop fighting and make up. We have enough problems as it is." "No, wait," Layla cried, but the door had already shut, and Vorden was rushing off to the office. "I'm sorry, Peter," Layla said. "Let's just keep it like this for now. I'll stay by the door, and if anything happens, I'll leave first." "Well, why don't you let me head over to the fridge and see if I can try to make the hunger go away?" Peter asked. Layla took a deep breath before replying. "Fine." Using her telepathic ability, she opened the fridge door and pulled out a piece of meat for Peter, making sure Peter kept his hands up while she was doing this. After seeing what he was capable of and what happened to Earl, she wasn't taking any chances. When Peter asked if he could use his hands to eat, Layla allowed it, but she kept her arrow slightly drawn and facing Peter the whole time. "Quinn, where the hell are you?" Layla thought. Inside the office, Quinn did as asked and sat down in the seat opposite the lady. He was still unsure exactly why they had called him here. "Now, Quinn, I'm sure you're thinking why we called you here, right?" Nathan said. "Well, as you may know, there was a death yesterday, and we're trying to find out who's responsible." "Wait, you're saying it wasn't a beast?" Quinn said, trying to act surprised. "Well, it might be, who knows? All we do know is there have been quite a few cases like this before. Do you remember how we called you into questioning a while ago? Well, back then we didn't ask you many questions, because a level 1 couldn't possibly be able to kill higher levels. So after asking whether you did it or not, we let you go. However, death seems to be following you around lately, and we need to know if it's bad luck, or maybe it's someone with bad luck that is following you around. So please, if you could touch the pretty lady's hand, we can begin the questioning." Quinn did as asked, and the two touched hands. At first, there was no reaction as the woman had yet to activate her ability. All Quinn could hope for now was that they would ask him simple questions like last time. If they just asked him if he was the one responsible for Earl's death, then he could answer truthfully. It seemed like he had gotten away with it the last time due to him only being a level 1. They never really considered him a suspect in the first place. But this time was different. It was the second time he was being interrogated, so they must have found some type of linking him to the others. But the truth was he really did have no clue about what happened to Brandon. He only knew about Loop. "Now, Quinn, do you know the truth of what happened to Earl Hampton yesterday?" the lady asked. This was it, Quinn thought. They had asked a question, and in an instant, she would know if he was lying or not. Her hands started to glow, and energy started to enter Quinn through his hands. Then a message from the system appeared. "An ability has been detected. User's mental strength and charm is strong enough to block the ability. Would you like to block the ability?" To his surprise, a new message had appeared, unlike what happened last time. It was an unexpected but welcome result. When the ability was used on him last time, it had completely gone through. The only difference between now and before was he had evolved into a full vampire and obtained the charm stat. It seemed like the charm stat was becoming more useful with every new problem he faced. The issue now was if he blocked the girl's ability, would she be able to tell it was blocked? Or would it feel like he was telling the truth? In the end, it depended on how her ability would react to him blocking it. Quinn was unsure of this as well. It was a total gamble. Still, he decided there was nothing to lose right now, so his best option was to block the ability and see how she would react. After confirming with the system that he wished to block her ability, Quinn answered the question, "No." She then let go of Quinn's hands. "He's telling the truth," she said. The reason why she believed this was because of how her ability worked. It couldn't actually tell if someone was telling the truth or if someone was lying. The ability could actually only determine if someone was lying. When someone she was touching was lying, she would feel a reaction from her ability, but there was no reaction when someone was telling the truth. This meant if no reaction was felt, then that person wasn't lying. What she didn't know was that Quinn was able to block her ability entirely, ultimately causing no reaction to happen whatsoever. The interrogation went on after the girl touched Quinn's hands again. Nathan was asking Quinn questions about the missing students from before, and eventually this line of questioning led to the bite marks. Quinn answered the questions he could as truthfully as possible, but whenever he wanted something to stay hidden, he would use the system to block the girl's ability. "All right, the interrogation is over, Quinn," Nathan said. "It seems like you were innocent, just like we thought." "Oh, then why did you try to question me?" Quinn asked, "Just to be absolutely certain." Nathan replied, "This time, we have decided to be thorough, since there has now been more than one case, and it seems that they're following the same pattern. Still, we can now be sure that you're not the culprit, just like we expected." Quinn was then asked to stand next to Faye and Haley to the side of the interrogation room. They stood there for a while as they stared at the door, waiting for the one they truly thought was the culprit. Then a few moments later, a knock at the door was heard. "Come in," Nathan shouted. Vorden had walked through the door, and to his surprise, Quinn was there with them. "Please, Vorden, is it? If you could sit in this chair, we would like to ask you a few questions." This was bad, Quinn thought. Although he had gotten through the integration due to his system's ability, the same couldn't be said for Vorden. If they asked him the same questions they had asked Quinn, then he, or even all of them, would be caught. As soon as Vorden had entered the room and saw Quinn and the others, he was trying his best to figure out what was going on. Judging by the fact the head of the first years, General Nathan, was here would suggest it was very serious. However, Vorden couldn't make the link between him and Quinn. How had he come to the conclusion the two of them were involved in something? If someone had spotted them when they were escaping with Peter, it would make more sense for them to call Layla and Peter, not Quinn. The only thing that the two of them had done together was head to the red portal planet. Unknown to both of them, the thing that had linked the two together were the bite marks. It was too much of a coincidence to see bite marks on multiple students as well as one on the red portal planet. The one connection they all had was Quinn. But they had their doubts it could be him. So now their number one suspect was the person who was with Quinn at the time of these events. "Please sit down," Nathan said politely. One thing was for sure, Vorden was happy that it was Nathan in the room and not Duke. After learning everything that Duke had done to try and get rid of him for some reason, Vorden would have been tempted to attack him right there and then. Vorden sat down in the chair opposite the girl. While he was sitting, he would give the odd glance towards Quinn. He could see that Quinn had a worried look on his face, which meant something was going to happen that they didn't like. "Now we're just here to ask you a few questions, Vorden. Simple, right?" Nathan said with a smile. Usually Vorden was quite good at reading people, but for some reason Nathan creeped him out with that smile, because it was nearly impossible for him to tell if it was genuine or not. "But I warn you to answer truthfully now, for our beautiful girl here can tell when you're lying or when you're telling the truth." Suddenly, Vorden realized why Quinn was fidgeting about so much and why he looked so worried. They were clearly questioning Vorden about some type of event, had they found out what he was, and just wanted him to confirm it, or did it have something to do with Peter? The problem was Vorden himself didn't know how much information Quinn had revealed. The women then held out her hand for Vorden to touch it. When the two of them touched hands, Vorden had copied the women's abilities, but he didn't really know how it worked, and it wasn't something he could figure out right now. If he could, perhaps there was a way he could use it against her. "Did you have anything to do related to death of the student named Earl Hampton?" she asked. Vorden didn't answer immediately, because he was trying to think. Hearing that name, Vorden finally knew why they had called him. He didn't know why Quinn had been asked to come here, or what Quinn had said, but the best thing to do now was to lie and not get caught. All Vorden could do was hope that Quinn had done the same. The teachers had made one mistake before interrogating Vorden, and that was telling him the abilities of the female in front of him. If her ability worked similar to the lie detectors of the past, then as long as the person answering believed their own answer, or if they really didn't know the even, then it would still be seen as the truth. Although Vorden was there, the same couldn't be said for Syl. He couldn't rely on Ratton because Ratton often stood by Vorden's side when he was in the chair watching everything he did while criticizing him and also giving him advice. But it was different for Syl. Syl spent most of his time sleeping in the room or just sitting in the back, staring blankly in front of him. This was the only option he had, and he hoped it would work. He closed his eyes and left the chair. As he did, he walked over towards Syl, who was in a fetal position, rocking backwards and forwards like he usually did. Syl, there is some lady who wants to ask you some questions. Vorden said, all you need to do is answer them, and then we can go play. Play? Syl replied back, staring at Vorden. Yeah, Quinn is in the room as well, and they asked him the same question. So I need you to do the best you can to answer for me now. Okay. Whenever Vorden spoke to Syl, he would speak in a slow, patient voice, like a mother did when talking to their child. This was because Syl's mind was quite childlike. One wrong word could set him off on a tantrum. Usually parents were stronger than their kids, though, and if this were to happen, they could control them. But in this case, Syl was both stronger than Ratton and Vorden, so they always had to speak to Syl a careful manner. Okay, and then Quinn and I can play together, right? Syl asked. Yeah, but maybe only for a little bit, okay? Vorden replied. Syl sat there as if he was thinking about it. Meanwhile, outside Vorden's mind. If you don't reply, Vorden, we have to take your silence as a confession that you were involved somehow. Nathan said. Just as Vorden was about to give up and go back into the chair, Syl replied. Deal, Syl said with a smile on his face. Syl stood up and ran over to the chair with a smile on his face. Back outside, Syl was happily smiling away, looking at the people around him. When he spotted Quinn, he started to wave. Quinn found the actions weird, especially when they were in a tough situation like this. This behavior was unlike how Vorden usually acted. Still, Quinn decided to wave back, which put an even bigger smile on Syl's face. You have a question for me, Syl said, pointing at himself. Even the woman was a little taken aback by the change in attitude, but decided to press on. She repeated the question and asked again. No, I wasn't there. Syl replied. I don't even know who this Earl is. The only person I know is Quinn, Syl said, pointing in Quinn's direction. The women continued to ask questions that Nathan had presented, and Syl continued to answer in a naive, childlike manner. He's telling the truth. Not a single time did either of them lie. Nathan then went to adjust the glasses on his face, a habit of his when he was stressed out. Maybe we really do have a beast roaming around the school. Nathan then looked at the two of them. His gut feeling was telling him something was wrong. But it was impossible. The girl's ability was clearly telling them they were looking in the wrong direction. You two stay here for now, Nathan said. We're going to keep you here for a while, and pull up some people who were around the scene at the time, see if anyone spotted you there too. But we already answered your questions. Quinn complained. Look, if you're not guilty, then you have nothing to worry about, right? Nathan replied. All I ask is that you stay here a little longer. With that, most of the sergeants had left the room to try and gather more information. The only ones left inside were them with Faye and the girl. Now that the two of them were no longer under interrogation, they were free to sit on the couch and relax together. Right now, Faye was busy looking over some documents with the girl, while the two boys were sitting next to each other. But while doing so, Syl couldn't help but keep smiling at Quinn. Vorden, are you okay? Quinn asked. Syl then turned his head to the left and right to check if anyone was nearby, before placing his hand over his mouth and whispered, Oh, I'm not Vorden. My name is Syl. Will you calm the heck down? Ratton shouted. Vorden was continuously pacing up and down as he saw Syl take control of the seat in the black room. It was a rare occurrence. Syl usually came out in times of danger, and even then, once the danger was over, he would return back to his dark corner. Yet for some reason, Syl seemed to be slightly changing ever since Vorden had first met Quinn. Vorden liked the change and thought Quinn would eventually be a good influence on him. But now was not the time. They were in a tense situation, and Quinn had enough on his mind. Vorden could do nothing but stand there. He was afraid if he was to approach Syl, he might freak out and remain in control for the whole time. Vorden, are you okay? Quinn whispered back. Syl quickly shook his head rapidly. I told you. My name is Syl. I have been waiting to meet you, Quinn. Quinn did not know how to react to this. He calmed down and started to think. How did Vorden manage to escape the interrogation with the girl? Was it something to do with his power? Or something entirely different? Right now, Vorden was claiming to be a different person. If the person before him didn't look exactly like Vorden, he would have believed him. Maybe it is an ability he copied before coming here. Quinn thought. A mind swap ability which allowed Vorden to fool the girl. Vorden, you are a genius. Nice to meet you, Sil. Quinn smiled back. Thanks for helping us back there. We really owe you one. No problem at all, Sil said. He lifted his hand and started rubbing Quinn's curly hair, as if he was a cute dog. Quinn was starting to have odd feelings about this. If it was just the two of them in a room, he would have pulled away or even pushed Vorden, no Sil back. But they were still under watch, and he didn't want to cause a scene. If you ever need any help, you can always call me. Inside the black room, Sil left the chair and walked away. As he crossed Vorden, he said, Thank you. It looks like he won't become another Kaser after all. Hearing that name brought back bad memories for Vorden and Ratton, but now was not the time to think about it. Vorden quickly rushed over to the chair and took control. To Vorden's side was Quinn. However, his hand was still on top of Quinn's hair. His face went bright red as he pulled his hand back. Sorry about that. That was... Vorden started to stumble on his words. That wasn't you, I could tell. Quinn replied. Good thinking on the mind swap thing. For now, as long as none of us were seen that day, we have nothing to worry about. As the words left Quinn, he felt something fade away from his body. He was losing an important part of himself. The connection with something was being lost, and he knew exactly what it was. What's wrong? Asked Vorden. From Nui.com. Grabbing his chest, Quinn replied, I think it's Peter. He is hungry. I can't control him for much longer. I'm already losing the connection. But it was only yesterday that he had his fill, said Vorden, making sure to keep his voice down. I know. Guess we're just unlucky. At this rate, if he doesn't get it every day, he will continue to starve. And I'm afraid when he is hungry, I can't control him like I did earlier. When Vorden heard Quinn's words, his mind went back to the time before he came to Nathan's office. When he entered the room, he remembered seeing Layla pointing an arrow at Peter. Did it already start back then? Vorden thought. They had been in the interrogation room for nearly 2 hours now. As they looked outside, the sun had already set and was replaced with the dark night sky. Quinn, we have to get out of here, Vorden said, grabbing him by the hand. I think Layla's in trouble. A beep was heard in the room as the door slid open, and in came Nathan, followed by Faye and Haley. Looks like we are in luck, and someone found something, Nathan said with a smile. Just behind them, another student entered the room. Inside the dorm room, Peter had eaten every single bit of raw meat he could find in the fridge, but it didn't help his hunger at all, and the pains in his stomach were starting to get worse. Peter, please. You are really starting to scare me, Layla said. He was now hunched over the floor, grabbing his stomach. Layla, please, just leave, Peter shouted. I can't. What if you go kill someone again? Come on, you can fight it. I have been on diets 10 times worse than this. Once I only drank juice with no food. Would you believe that? Layla continued rambling on, in the hope of calming both Peter's nerves as well as her own. I would rather it be someone who deserved it than you, Peter said as he looked up at her from the ground. You were the one who taught me how much of a scumbag I was, but I'm different now. At that moment, he felt as if someone was reaching down into his stomach with their hand and were trying to pull all the food he just ate up and onto the floor. A few seconds later, everything that Peter ate came back up along with some greenish liquid. Peter, are you okay? Layla asked, with a concerned look on her face. As Peter raised his head, his eyes were glowing a bright red. His 2 front fangs grew larger. They were sticking out over his lower lip now. He slowly got up from the ground and made his way towards Layla. Peter, I'm sorry, Layla said as Peter edged closer towards her. She let go of the drawn arrow, aiming for Peter's knee. The arrow hit the mark. It made no difference as Peter didn't even try to dodge the arrow. He pulled the arrow out from his knee and broke it with a snap. The mark left by the arrow healed instantly. This was it. She tried her best to control him, but it was clear that Peter was no longer present. He was just another monster now. She reached for the door and tried opening it, but a loud crash, as if someone had just broken a glass, made her pause. Turning around, she saw the bedroom window was broken. She rushed to the window, avoiding the broken glass. As she looked outside, there was no sign of Peter. They were currently in a 3-story building. If a human was to jump from here without any support, they would break their legs. But Peter was no longer human. Peter limped in the darkness towards the forest. The fall broke his legs, but even as he walked, they continued to heal. I won't hurt any of you guys. I promise. Peter told himself. But I have to do something to get rid of this hunger. Out from behind the teachers came a student. One that Quinn wasn't familiar with. However, Vorden knew him quite well. As soon as the student entered and looked at the two of them, he also noticed Vorden. The student was Berg's son Shield. At the sight of Vorden, his palms suddenly started to sweat. After seeing him on planet Kaladi, Berg had decided to try to gather more information about him and his family. He had informed his family members that he had met up with one of the Blades. Immediately, their tone of voice had changed, and his father said to do whatever he could to make sure the Blades wouldn't get upset with them. It was a strange reaction. Although his father didn't carry a high rank in his family, he was still respected as a member of one of the Big Four. It was the first time he had seen him act like this at the mention of anyone's name. The even stranger thing was, when Berg had tried to search information about the Blade family, he couldn't find anything. Nothing at all about what type of ability they had, nothing about their contributions in the war. Even when asking his friends, none of them seemed to have ever heard about the Blade family. So it made the reaction his father had all the more strange. Soon enough, though, his father's fear became his fear, and the mystery behind Vorden grew within his mind. Now Berg here said on the day of the event, he saw a student running through the halls looking quite panicked. Nathan said, "Humans are strange things you see, and they love a little bit of gossip." While everyone else was heading to the second-year building to see what was going on, a single student was running in the opposite direction. Coincidentally, though, Berg's description seems to match one of you, a curly black-haired boy. Quinn remained silent. There was no way they could convict him just for having a suspicion. The problem was that they now had a witness, and because they were suspicious of him, they would probably keep a closer eye on him from now on. This would only cause more problems in the future, especially now he had Peter running wild in his ranks. He decided the best thing to do for now was to just keep his mouth shut. If he said anything, it would be easy to slip up and make everything worse. Vorden then started to laugh by his side. "You really think Quinn did it?" Vorden said. "Come on, the two of them don't even share the same classes. Besides, do you know how many curly-haired students with black hair there are in this school?" "Well, you see, Vorden, that's why we brought him here, so he could confirm who he saw that day." That day, Berg had seen Quinn running through the halls. As soon as he entered the room, he recognized him, but seeing Vorden defend him so suddenly like that, he knew something was up. "This isn't the kid I saw that day." Berg said, "I'm pretty sure it was someone else." "What?" Nathan said. "Are you sure? Come closer and take another look." Berg did as asked and stepped closer and looked at Quinn carefully, trying to act the best he could. He took a quick glance at Vorden. He must have been imagining things, because he was seeing and feeling a strange power coming from him. But that can't be possible. "I'm sure it's definitely not him." Berg said, "Do you mind if I go now?" Nathan then went down to sit in his large office chair. He looked outside and could see the sky was now completely black, and only the moonlight was out. After letting out a big sigh, he leaned back and put his legs on the desk. "Let's call it a day. It looks like I've wasted everyone's time here for no reason." Nathan said, "You're all free to go home, and remember to get a good rest." Quinn was unsure what had just happened. Perhaps Berg really did see someone else running through those halls, and it wasn't him. But whatever the case was, they were now free to go. Quinn and Vorden looked at each other and walked quickly out of the room. They had the urge to run, but they tried to walk in a slow and normal way. Otherwise, the others would notice that something was up. Before leaving, Vorden turned and said, "Thank you, Berg. I owe you one. Just remember this for the future." Berg replied. Outside, Peter was walking through the forest. He was no longer limping as his legs were now fully healed. However, the pain in his stomach still hadn't disappeared. It was a strange feeling. Peter's mind was all there. It was him, and he could control his body. But all he could think about was eating raw human flesh. He kept thinking about how delicious Earl had tasted. Not wanting to hurt any of his friends, he tried to go as far away from the school as possible, and before he released it, he had ended up in the park forest once again. "Am I going to die if I don't find anything? Anyone?" He slowly made his way through the woods until eventually he had reached a pathway. The pathway went around the outskirts of the woods and park until it eventually had an entrance and an exit, one leading to the city and the other leading back to the direction of the school. But it was late at night, and not many people would be walking through the park to head to the center of the city, as all the shops would be closed by now. The only thing that was still open were convenience shops that were stationed just a little bit before the park. Should I head to the convenience store? Maybe I can find someone and follow them back, pull them into the woods. Peter was saying to himself. Just as Peter was thinking of going through with his own suggestion, he spotted someone walking down the path. His body wanted to lunge out at the person, but Peter tried to fight against it, staying in the woods. Suddenly, the person stopped and stood still. I can feel your bloodlust from here, the boy said. Come out, you ghoul, and tell me where the hell your master is. The boy's eyes glowed red in the dark as he stared right into Peter's eyes.